Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem. Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio. It's episode 161. Dennis Graff here with Kasper Rosalowski, and we're back, baby. We're back. It's good to be back, Cass. We've had adventures. It is June the 20th, in case people want to know the date. It's cold out here in Melbourne. You were traveling around. I was over in the middle of nowhere in New Zealand in Greymouth. It's good to be back. We missed out on the UFC 225 chat, unfortunately. But we're back with some fun guests today. A little bit of UFC 225 as well, so it's all good.
Yeah, we'll chat about that in the intro. Just quickly, the guests for this week, we've got some sexy names for you. We've got the heavyweight champion, Stipe Miocic, returning to Submission Radio. Haven't had Stipe on in a while, and obviously he's fighting Daniel Cormier, I think just 2 short weeks. International Fight Week, a huge fight. So can't wait to get the man on to chat to him about that and a bunch of other things. Also, Tai Tuivasa. I mean, we didn't do a UFC 225 post-fight show, but we have Ty on the program. Obviously, he had a big win over Andrei Arlovski, so there's a lot to chat to him about there. And also, he's in Singapore right now, and his good friend, brother-in-arms, Tyson Pedro, is going to be fighting on the card just this weekend. So, got to get the latest scoop, the latest gossip from Tai Tuivasa. There's actually a lot of stuff that I want to ask the man. And then also, Dave Meltzer is going to be on the program, talk about a whole bunch of things in the world of MMA. Obviously, what is he going to be talking about, Dennis? There's a lot of things to cover.
I'm really excited to speak with Dave. I mean, this is the guy that is the guy to speak to when you want to talk about pay-per-view buys, his thoughts on why the UFC 225 buys were lower than a lot of people thought. I mean, he brought out the figures that were higher than initially reported, but still, some people thought it was quite low. We'll talk about Robert Whittaker. Why isn't he a big draw in the United States yet? What could sort of happen in the future to make that happen? Covington, is he turning people off from tuning in? Dave's going to break that down for us. Also, he'll cover a really interesting article that he wrote about how the UFC are going to be making more money with this ESPN deal, but some of the reasons why might actually backfire for the company. So all that, plus we'll get his thoughts on McGregor and a whole lot more. Maybe even touch on the fact that WWE is going to come down to Melbourne here and do a big show at Madison Square Garden, at Melbourne Cricket Ground.
I wish we had Madison Square Garden here. That'd be awesome.
I know, but how about this? For people who don't know, Melbourne Cricket Ground, 100,000 plus sometimes in attendance. So why are they doing that? Interesting to see what he says about that and so much more. And Cass, it's great to be back. Just quickly, I had a great time in New Zealand, over in Greymouth. Found out that Greymouth made an Avengers comic book, which was very, very interesting.
Wow.
The guy just Googled some of the worst places on Earth for earthquakes, and Greymouth came up. It's like a little mining town, and he put it in the comic book alongside Tokyo, Japan, Manhattan, New York. So it was funny to see the little landmark make it into the comic book. Had a great time, had some great hiking, great people down there. I know you had a little bit of a break as well, did a little bit of traveling. How was your trip up to Brisbane?
It was good. I saw my girlfriend. She's over there. She's doing her PhD, and it was awesome. We just traveled around, ate a bunch of shit. I just ate so much shit food. I'm trying to diet these days and, be healthy and go to the gym and all that kind of stuff. But there's kind of a rule that when I see my girlfriend, we're both big foodies, and the diet's all out the window. So yeah, I think I put on like 5-6 kilos in about 6 days. So that was nice. And then, me being Polish. Actually, Chris from Fight News Australia, we were talking at one point, and he mentioned, hey, have you gone to this Polish pierogi place? Pierogi are obviously those dumplings that Polish people make and Russian people make and everyone in the Eastern Bloc. And I said, no, I haven't. He said, yeah, there's a good place in Brisbane. And I was like, cool. And then on the last day that I was there, we drove like about 40 minutes to this place. And then we're trying to find it. And we're like, where is it? Are they fucking hiding this from us or something? And then we couldn't find it. So I'm like, all right, I'm calling this place. And we start calling it. Obviously got the number from Google. And then my girlfriend's like, I can hear the phone. And I'm like, where is it coming from? And then we turned around and they were closed. And obviously the depression set in. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm going to the toilet. I need to just, need to just unwind. This has been a hard day for me. And then my girlfriend sends me a picture saying of a Facebook post of the pierogi place. They had closed for good and they were never opening ever again. So yeah, that was a misadventure by us. But yeah, other than that, it was good times.
There's a good photo of you frowning near the shop.
It was good.
Up
it was
on
good
Facebook
frown.
that I liked. Yeah. Real pain. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
They're on the run, the pierogi people. They've poisoned too many people, the good people in Brisbane.
It's gonna be like
the
the thrill and the agony. You know how the UFC releases those slow motion videos, like you can see the people who lost the fights just in despair. It was like that. But we're seeing Wayne Brady this weekend. I'm taking my girlfriend to see Wayne Brady. So that's
nice.
good. We missed that years and years and years ago, and then she's coming into town for her birthday. And then I was driving and I saw like a big poster with Wayne Brady, and I was like, when? And then it's on the day she's coming. So I'm a good boyfriend for now.
Worked out perfectly. There it is. Throat sealing up. No, it's awesome stuff. And hopefully Wayne Brady didn't eat any of those pierogi, otherwise he might not make it either. There'll be another frowny photo there.
Yeah.
But we mentioned it. We weren't around for UFC 225 cast, so just a couple of thoughts before we get into the episode. Give the people our thoughts on sort of Robert Whittaker, Yoel Romero. I mean, where should we begin? Do you have any thoughts you want to sort of kick this off with?
So, I mean, okay, I'll give the score. I scored it a draw, 47-47. I think Whittaker obviously took the first 2 rounds. I think the third round, obviously, Romero, that was the big one where he hurt Whittaker. And in saying that, I guess there's some debate. Should that be a 10-8 for Romero? Even though Romero hurt Whittaker and he hurt him pretty badly, Whittaker still landed a lot during that round, and he also sort of started firing back, while he was hurt. They were sort of trading, going back and forth, Whittaker using his elbows. So I would say just a 10-9 for Romero there. Round 4, obviously Whittaker. I think that's the one that sort of had a bit of a debate as well, because Romero hurt Whittaker at the end. And even though he rocked him and Whittaker was on wobbly feet, he recovered really well. It wasn't like a, near fight ending moment. And that whole round, Whittaker was landing at will. He was piecing up Romero and he landed some good head kicks. So I can't justify giving that, to Romero or making a draw or anything like that. That's clearly Whittaker's round. And then round 5, obviously Romero's fight, obviously Romero's round, that was a clear 10-8. So for me, it's 47-47, and yeah. But I guess here's
a super close fight as well.
Yeah,
I mean, it's one of those things.
It was a great fight, an amazing. Fight.
It was a great fight. It was a fantastic fight. People really got their money's worth. The ones that bought the pay-per-view, which we found out wasn't as many as anticipated, but. People have different I agree with you, by the way. I thought it was a draw as well, but I guess people they'll be breaking it down their own sort of way. A razor close fight for a lot of people to sort of go back and rewatch. But what a great showdown between the two, and another tough fight for Rob.
I think it's almost a bit of a shame because Rob sort of hasn't had his moment properly yet. As far as his title defenses. And he was a little bit robbed of it this time in the sense that Romero didn't make weight. And then the way the fight played out leading into this one, I think a lot of people really respected Rob. He was, even though he's not a big personality or a big trash talker, I think everybody unanimously likes Rob. You won't find people that are like, I hate that guy. I don't like him. He's not like a polarizing guy like Colby Covington, and people like that about him as a champion. But I think after this fight, even though you should sort of respect, the work that these guys put in and the amazing battle that they had, I think Rob sort of lost a little bit of shine because people think, Romero either drew him or beat him. A lot of people thought Romero won that fight. Here's the thing, though. I think even if it was a draw, it's kind of like the Woodley Wonderboy situation where a draw is great. A draw, means you can hang with the champion, but it also doesn't mean that you win the belt. So even if, you scored a draw, that doesn't really take anything away from Robert Whittaker. And in my opinion, I don't think we'll ever see Romero and Whittaker face off again. Ever. Just because if you're the UFC, you're sort of taking Rob and you sort of taking and running. Not in a bad way, but just, what is the incentive to make that rematch? I know a lot of people were sort of talking about trilogy fight. Joe Rogan hilariously, accidentally said rubber match, and people gave him a lot of flack over that. But if you're the UFC, you got Robert Whittaker, he's got this Australian market behind him, the pay-per-view market, the demographic. He's probably the guy that you want to promote. He's also younger, whereas Romero's on the way, very, very close to retirement. I think that the worst thing could be for the UFC if they did that rematch, Romero won, and then he said, all right, peace out, I'm taking the belt and I'm going. And then Rob gets the title back by default. So I think, the UFC, if they can, they will completely avoid that matchup. And, yeah, there's just and also I can understand if say this did monster buys. I understand if there's like 5, 6, 700,000 pay-per-view, they might go, all right, well there's money in this, we'll do this again because people liked it so much. But because it wasn't a high drawing pay-per-view, it's even more of a reason not to do the fight again. So I think by now a lot of people sort of think, yeah, it's probably going to be Kelvin or Weidman. I think, honestly, by the time Romero even works his way back up to a title shot, if he even stays at middleweight, I think even then the UFC aren't going to, grant him a title shot, because then it's probably going to be a case where, like, dude, you're even older now, you're even more likely to retire, and we don't want you retiring as champion. So I don't think we will ever see that trilogy fight ever again.
See, you say that, but then let's say Kelvin Gastelum gets the fight against Whittaker and they do a rematch between Weidman and Romero, and then Romero destroys Weidman. And let's say he wins another fight, because the middleweight division at the moment isn't exactly stacked, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even though he's not a draw, and even though it doesn't make sense, who knows? The UFC may end up doing this fight eventually.
So I guess he's saying if Romero is champion somehow, then we might see Whittaker and Romero fight again.
If Romero is champion somehow, or even if Whittaker defends his belt against Gastelum, but they decide to put Weidman and Romero together in the next matchup, or if he ends up fighting middleweight again and he destroys Weidman, then I don't know, maybe they won't give it to him then, but then if he destroys someone else and there's still no one there to contend for the belt against Rob, who knows, it could end up being another rematch. But
either Colby Covington or Conor McGregor will move up to middleweight.
Yeah, that's right.
GSP.
It's interesting. You know what's interesting about it is middleweight and light heavyweight. It's so empty right now.
Yeah.
You look back at these two divisions, and the light heavyweight has always been struggling. But I mean, when they lost Phil Davis, Ryan Bader, and when Gegard Mousasi sort of left the middleweight slash sort of light heavyweight divisions, it really created a gap. They haven't really pushed anyone big up there, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, it's good to see Israel Adesanya fighting Brad Tavares, but he's not really anywhere close to that title shot yet, so it'll be interesting to see how they try and fill out those gaps.
And he's fighting in a couple of weeks. It's almost worrying to see what they're going to do with Israel, because we've said it before on the show, like, you need to slow down, you need to pace these guys. Even Tai Tuivasa, we're going to speak to momentarily, like, he just beat Arlovski. Where do you go from there? Like, I think they need to slow down with Tai Tuivasa, you know, let him grow as a fighter. He's not ready for guys like, you know, Cain Velasquez's or some of the, you know, maybe we haven't really seen his wrestling, but I think they need to slow him down. And I think with middleweight looking the way it is, they might be, you know, looking to push Israel Adesanya. And it's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse before it gets better, because you got guys like, you know, you mentioned Rockholder's already left. He was a key part of that division. Romero's gonna retire soon. Jacare's getting up there in age. He's gonna retire soon.
Chris Weidman's had 101 injuries. Who knows how much longer he'll be in there? Yeah.
Or if he even sticks around at middleweight, maybe he'll go to light heavyweight at some point. So yeah, you need these guys like Gastelum and Whittaker. Anthony Smith, he knocked out Rashad Evans. He could be... Actually, no, he's a light heavyweight. What am I talking about? So,
I love Anthony Smith, but he kind of looks like a bad guy from the 80s movies. He kind of looks like one of the guys that would be working with the bad guy from Kindergarten Cop. He's got that look to him. He's lethal.
We should get him on the show. I'll ask him about that look. Why do you look?
Yeah, that's it. I agree with you. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with that. And of course, Covington is now the interim champ. So it's obviously he put an amazing performance against RDA. Really shocked a lot of people. I really thought RDA would have him in that fight. He ended up winning. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that fight between him and Woodley. And Tai Tuivasa put on a good fight against Andrei Arlovski. We're about to talk to him on this show soon. But I was also impressed with Andrei Arlovski. I thought Arlovski stayed in there a lot longer than people thought he would as well.
Yeah. And I'm also surprised he didn't use his wrestling. I thought this was going to be, the Struve fight all over again. He went in there, stood toe-to-toe. Watching it in real time, I thought Arlovski won. So... yeah, I was kind of surprised that Tai got the nod. I rewatched it. I thought, all right, yeah, okay, I understand why he got the nod. But yeah, that was a great fight. You mentioned Covington. I think he's very smart with this whole Donald Trump thing. I know Covington cops a lot of shit, a lot of flack, and whether you like him or don't. And I think we've both agreed that some of his promos. Because the thing is, he says the same thing over and over and over again. And I know Chael did that, but at least with Chael, you sort of were like, I wonder what he's going to say this. And sometimes Chael would flip the script. You'd be like, hey, Chael, what do you think of this guy? And you think like, yeah, Chael's going to be like, this guy's terrible. And then Chael would be like, well, actually, I think he's great. And you're like, what? What? Like even his partnership with Yushin Akami, that was very random. Like,
yeah, it's really random.
With Covington, you pretty much, you can see sort of what he's going to say. But this Trump thing, I think, is smart, because obviously Donald Trump is always in the media. His name gets a lot of clicks, a lot of headlines. And if you can somehow align him... Imagine if Colby Covington actually did get a chance to meet Donald Trump. Not only would he be getting, coverage from MMA websites, he'd be getting coverage from all sorts of websites. And any kind of coverage is good coverage. So I think he's playing it quite smart in the lead up to this Woodley thing. And he's drawn Woodley out. Woodley's all over the fight now. So that's good. Good for him. I'm happy for him.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting, especially when he makes that visit, and then who knows what Woodley's going to say, and then it'll be interesting how it all plays into the dynamic of the build-up to the fight. And obviously, Curtis Blaydes just quickly did a good job to put away Alistair Overeem, kind of put an exclamation point on that fight at the end. Puddle of blood on the octagon floor. So... Interesting event. All in all, I had to say it was a good event. I really enjoyed it. It was a good pay-per-view, except for the CM Punk thing, which was so hard to watch. And I know a part of me was like, I was actually not that opposed to having him on the pay-per-view. I was like, because I didn't really know what kind of skills he had. But when you saw his technique, how he punched, how he kicked, how he moved around, you almost thought, did someone from the UFC need to go past one of his camps to see what he could do before he got this opportunity? You know what I mean? He was very, very, and I mean, I have all the respect for him because he went in there and he fought again and against a guy like Mike Jackson, who we saw was a lot more experienced and, was tearing him up in that fight. But I mean, he did not have the skill level to be, or to be in the UFC, let alone to be on the main card. So that was hard to watch. That kind of turned me off a little bit at the start. It was like, God, I hope this fight is over soon. Yeah. I think Mike Jackson didn't help anyone by sort of taking. I know he said that's the kind of guy that he is, and he's just kind of chilled out and laid back. But I feel like if he went in there and he stopped CM Punk early and sort of ended that fight, people didn't have to keep watching it. I think maybe he would have had more of a place in the UFC, at least one more fight. But yeah. I could totally see how people could be frustrated with the fact that this is your big opportunity, Mike. You got to finish this guy, So I don't know what he was doing.
Yeah, I think I don't know if anyone from the UFC actually came by and watched CM Punk training. But
it seems crazy, right? Like I would send someone.
I don't think they care. I don't think they care at all. I think with them, it's just like CM Punk's name is going to draw people. Who cares if this fight is a dumpster fire? We'll probably never see the guy after this fight again. We just want to get the money anyway. So they're just like, it is what it is.
I would care heaps, and I think after this they should care because they're gonna end up being in the same problem that Bellator ended up in when Data 5000 or whatever his name was fighting. Making sure that celebrities can fight. I don't know. To me, it was just dumbfounding. Go have a look and see if the guy has the ability to fight. And I thought they did that from the very beginning. I thought someone would have gone by and being like, all right, let me see some footage. Let me see this. Let me see him do some sparring. Much like they do with a lot of other fighters before they get signed to the UFC. At least see the guy has something. And we found out he has nothing. And I mean, not nothing. And I don't want to be disrespectful to him, but his technique was well below. Almost an amateur level when he fought, which was, and I'm sure he worked hard, but it's just like, whoa. I know a lot of people were just shocked when they saw his performance on the pay-per-view.
Yeah, I know Dana White went out at one point and he was singing praises and, Punk works this hard. I'm sure Dana White saw that and I think he knew exactly what was going to happen. I think they're like, yeah, I think it almost benefited the UFC that the first fight was over so quickly that no one really got to see a whole lot. And then there was that intrigue factor about, we didn't see much from him. He got taken down by a guy that was so much better. What's he going to look like this time? And then, yeah, I mean, look, I will say respect to him for taking some big shots and sort of carrying through.
Oh, for sure.
He didn't have the skill, but he had the heart. I'll give him that much.
Yeah, he had the heart. Good on him. I'm interested to see what happens with him next as well. Will he keep fighting? If I was him, and if he wants to keep fighting, I would. I mean, he'll probably end up in Bellator. I mean, what are we really talking about here? Yeah. He'll probably be on Bellator, no doubt about it. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if because you would think the UFC would just cut him. Like obviously he will never fight in the UFC again. But he did speak how he spoke about to Dana at one point after his first fight. And he said, "Look, I'm fighting again regardless, whether it's here, whether it's in Bellator, whether it's somewhere, I will fight." So I don't know what his contract is like, but you think him and Dana would have the kind of relationship where Dana would just be like, "Look, that's fine, we'll cut you," knowing that he'll go over to and I think he's. I don't want to say this in a rude way, but I think he, as far as a draw, he's sort of damaged goods. So I think the UFC now won't care as much. I think they might be like, look, if you want to go to Bellator, that's fine. Probably not going to bring in that many ratings. He's so far removed from his WWE fame anyway. It's not like he's hot off the press leaving the WWE. Like when he was dropping those pipe bombs and everything, like that was the time. Or almost at UFC 203 was too long. But now it's a completely different story.
It's really interesting as well because I was having a little bit of watch of the Money in the Bank pay-per-view or whatever, the network special the other day, and they're still chanting CM Punk. They're still doing that whole thing. But it's almost like they see him in two different versions. Like the CM Punk, the Phil Brooks that's in the UFC isn't actually CM Punk. I feel like he separated himself so much from that character.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting perspective for promoters like Dana White, where in the future, if you are bringing in, trying to cross-promote these pro wrestlers or even a guy like Scott Coker, it may not always pay off. I almost feel like people are kind of getting sick of it now. Like before there was a wow factor, and now it's like, well, we'll see what kind of happens. Like it's not, they kind of know it's likely that the favorite wrestler will get beat up and they're not as excited about it. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I'm interested to see how Jack Swagger goes because he's a guy with a lot of wrestling ability, so we'll see how he goes at Bellator. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the whole and there's like a long history of that happening, you know, like Alberto Del Rio and Pride, Dos Caras Jr., putting him up against Croker. Even like Bam Bam Bigelow, he had an MMA fight back in the day, and you know, he was like a big tough guy you know, he was one of those guys in wrestling that was known as like a tough guy who could fight, and he got destroyed, you know, when it came down to it in the cage. So yeah, I think the mystique is, it's crazy. The mystique of wrestlers sort of being these tough guys is kind of broken, you know. Even like some of the guys, like there was that Fall Brawl pay-per-view back in the day in WWF, and then like a lot of the guys that were considered tough got destroyed, like JBL, he got knocked out by Bart Gunn, and then Bart Gunn, who like knocked out all these other guys, he got knocked out by Butterbean like really, really easily.
Yeah.
So.
Butterbean took his soul, and I think he was never the same again. That was brutal.
Yeah.
Maybe they should get Butterbean in. I don't know. Probably not.
We're going to speak to
maybe.
Jack Swagger, see how he's doing ahead of his MMA debut. Just Curtis Blades, man. Yeah, so super impressive win. But I think, and this is not a critique on Curtis Blades, but you look at like why Tai Tuivasa was on that main card. He was on there because he's, you know, he's a big personality. I think if Curtis Blades was more outspoken, he would have been on that main card, I think, without a doubt. So it's a shame that he was buried on there. And it's like, you look at the Ngannou win over him, and that was probably by far the most impressive win that anyone has had over him in a long time, if ever. You know, and then Curtis Blades, I don't know that he necessarily beat it. I mean, I don't think he beat it, but that was a huge exclamation mark that he put right at the end of the fight. So that was great. But then now you might have Brock Lesnar coming in. I almost feel like it's a GSP situation where you've got these contenders. You got Cain Velasquez, you got Volkov, you got Curtis Blades, and he did the right thing. He got on the mic, he said, I want the next title shot. Now Brock Lesnar might come in. Obviously, the UFC being UFC, they're going to go for the low-hanging fruit, the quick money, and Curtis Blades, he's probably going to have to fight someone else. And I have a feeling, I wouldn't be surprised if he fights Cain Velasquez, because if you have DC and Stipe, they fight in a couple of weeks. Lesnar, and we don't even know if he's in the USADA pool or not, because the thing is, USADA can hide that information to not spoil whether someone's retired or unretired. So for all we know, Lesnar's been in the drug testing pool for, you know, months now or weeks. Mm-hmm. We don't know that. I know that a lot of people have seen that he's gotten a lot smaller in the WWE. Like his physique is declining a lot. He's looking a lot smaller. I don't know if that's any indication. So we may even see Stipe versus Brock by the end of the year. I don't know. And then if that's the case, what do you do for Curtis Blades? Do you sit on the sidelines and wait? I think the UFC will want to sort of want him to be busy, and they'll put him and Cain Velasquez against each other, sort of like as a, I don't know, number one contenders fight. And then you might have, say, Stipe versus Cain. That would be big. You might have Stipe versus Blades. Or, let's say Lesnar's champion, they do the Cain rematch. Or Blades versus Lesnar. All good options.
Or if Stipe loses to DC, then
we won't see DC Cain. But we could see DC Lesnar. That could be big. Imagine
DC Lesnar would be good, but then if Stipe loses against DC and he's in decent shape, I mean, I know he wants to take a break because of his daughter, but then he's also in the pool of guys that could possibly fight Curtis Blades before he gets a title shot as well. So be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
But that, I think the exclamation point where he finished over him in that pool of blood, I think that's what Curtis Blades needed, because it was a good fight from him. But if it just kind of finished a decision win, I don't think it would do as much for him. So we'll see what happens with him there. And Blades doesn't really seem like the kind of guy that's too outspoken. I feel like if the UFC sort of give him a matchup and pay him the right amount of money, he'll probably take that over the title shot. But we'll see what happens.
And for the record, I think him and Stipe is an intriguing fight. We saw with Ngannou, Stipe, you know, it was a grueling fight. He was very tired by the end of it, even though he was out wrestling a guy who had almost no wrestling ability. Imagine him versus Curtis Blades. Even if Blades just want to use his wrestling ability, that'd be a tough fight for Stipe. That's not an easy win. So
yeah, for sure. And then I'm almost more interested in seeing that DC Lesnar fight. That's if DC beats Stipe, which will be a super hard task. I'm almost more interested in seeing that fight than Stipe versus Lesnar for some reason.
Really? Why is that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. To me, Stipe versus Lesnar, that's a really quick win for Stipe. I actually don't think Lesnar's going to last very long. To me, honestly, Stipe, to me, is just going to go in there. He'll move out of Lesnar's way, land a couple of punches, and Lesnar will probably be finished. And that's with all respect to Lesnar. Whereas DC Lesnar, I still think DC will destroy Lesnar, but I'm just kind of interested because, first of all, DC is such a big fan of Brock Lesnar. I just want to see his reaction leading into the fight. And second of all, they're both kind of wrestlers. Obviously, DC's got some really good striking as well, but, maybe it'll play out a little bit more interesting. I kind of want to see what it's like. Like, will Lesnar try and take DC down? Will he be able to do it? Probably not, but, that kind of stuff. Whereas the Stipe, I just see Stipe. And the build-up will be more interesting. With Stipe and Lesnar, we love Stipe. He's on the program today. But, Stipe is not going to really say anything. Lesnar's not really going to say anything. They'll kind of do the fight week stuff. They'll kind of square off, and then Stipe will quickly destroy him, and that'll be it. So, I don't know.
Remember UFC 200? Yeah, no, I think those are really good points. Remember UFC 200 where Lesnar got on the scales at early weigns, and then it's like 5 seconds, baby. He didn't even want to pose. He's like, we're good, and then it's like, okay, we're good.
Yeah, exactly. Or what about the press conference afterwards that he put on himself, asked a couple of questions, and said press conference is over and walked off? The guy runs his own ship, so that'll be interesting. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But, Cass, we said it. We've got a big fun lineup of people on the show. Before I jump to you, just a quick reminder to introduce our first guest. Just a quick reminder to everybody out there, give us a like on Facebook. That's facebook.com/submission radio AUS. Follow us on Twitter at submission AU. Well, AUS. Fuck. Facebook is Facebook is AU and Twitter is AUS. See, this is what happens when you've been away for too long. We also have an Instagram. You guys can check that out. That's at Submission Radio. So check that out. A lot of fun stuff happening there. Cass, you mentioned it. A really fun show to come back to. We've got our first guest on the line, and you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest coming off a big win over Andrei Arlovski, UFC 225, the king of the shoey. He's now taking over Singapore and helping his friend Tyson Pedro prepare for his big fight against OSP. Straight out of Western Sydney, it's him again, Tai Tuivasa. Welcome back to the program. How are you, Tai?
What's happening, boys? What's going on?
Not much. It's good to have you on the program. Now, it's early in the morning there in Singapore, and you're having a bit of breakfast. So break it down for us. What's on the table? What's for breakfast today?
I just had Indian.
For breakfast?
Yeah, they got like everything, but you should see
What?
this buffet. It's crazy. I had the bacon, eggs, hash brown. Now I'm gonna go finish off with waffles and ice cream.
Wow. I guess this is the is it hard for Tyson Pedro being near you, watching you smash all this delicious food, and meanwhile he's got to make 205?
Oh, he's alright. He eats pretty much. He eats good food all the way up.
So he's not tempted by your waffles or Indian food or anything.
I think by the last week, I think he just get used to it and over it. Just want to hurry up and fight, I think.
Well, because we were watching leading into UFC 225, your team was having some delicious food as well, but you were stuck with, what was it, an octopus salad or a calamari salad?
That was actually one of the best feeds.
Really?
Really?
It was beautiful, yeah. But before that, I'd just been eating this boring shit chicken. And, greens and shit like that, eggs.
Wow. What was the first thing you ate after the fight? What was the victory meal, the celebration meal?
We had the green room backstage, usually pretty good. So they always have a really good feed.
Yeah.
And I always eat there. Always have like an ice cream bar and shit like that. So it was good. Yeah.
Nice. What do you think of Singapore? Is this your first time there?
Yeah, first time. It's really beautiful. It's clean. But it just started pissing down, so
yeah.
I don't think we're going outside today.
How's Tyson looking ahead of his fight? Obviously, he's got a big fight coming up this weekend.
No, he looks good. He's relaxed. He just wants to hurry up and fight, I think.
Do you have to help him at all, prepare him with anything, or are you just sort of cruising and enjoying the atmosphere, there for moral support?
I can't help him. He just he does his own thing. I'm just a special guest for the UFC, so.
That's awesome. So you'll be doing the Q&A and everything?
Yeah, I'm just lucky I get to watch Ty's fight.
Nice.
I mean, it's pretty interesting being the guest fighter. What's it feel like for you being a guest fighter? It's something new and fun. And also, are you excited about this whole Q&A thing? It should be interesting.
I haven't really thought about it, I just
you might have to.
Trip.
Any shoeys on stage, you think, during the Q&A, or?
Yeah, if they let me.
I feel like, yeah, I'd love to see the Singapore fans like come out and do some shoes with you. Maybe you teach them how to do it. Maybe they bring out some crazy shoes, some crazy Singapore fashion. What was your reaction?
hard laws over here too, so I'll probably get in trouble.
What are the laws? Like drinking or something?
I don't think you can spit and stuff like that.
Nah, you can't. Apparently, you're not allowed to chew gum on the street. It's as crazy as that.
Yeah, so
Wow.
So better be careful. Speaking of the shoey, let's go back to UFC 225 in Chicago. Were you disappointed that Joe Rogan sort of passed on his chance to do the shoey?
It was a little bit filthy. I think all of the Aussies were, but I don't know. It's up to him.
I like that you went for it though. You're a man of your word. When you said when he finished the speech and you were like, one more thing, I was like, oh man, here it comes.
Yeah, I know. But it was just like being rejected.
Yeah, on pay-per-view. Did you get a chance? Did you speak to him afterwards?
For the kiss and then got rejected. Look
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Hey?
Did you speak to him afterwards?
Nah.
It's interesting because he kept talking about it later on his program and just on the broadcast, and it kind of looks like Joe Rogan's an interesting guy. He's the kind of guy that sort of seems like he's sort of up for anything, but I think even the shoey for him is too much. It seemed like he was sort of avoiding the headlines leading into it, and then kind of quickly try to change the topic as soon as you brought it up. Like he was ready for you as soon as you brought it up.
Yeah, I know. It was a letdown, actually.
Yeah. What was in what was in the shoe that the fan gave you? Because you walked out of the cage and the fan gave you one straight away. What was in that?
Just beer, I think it was.
Okay.
That's disappointing as well.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw Ariel Helwani tweeted afterwards that I think before you did your post-fight interview, I think you or someone joked about peeing in a shoe, and then Ariel asked you, "Have you ever done that?" And you said yes. Is that true?
Yeah, he goes, I said, I think I said something.
Where's your shoe? Yeah.
He goes, I got no alcohol. I said, I'll piss in it.
Yeah. And he said, have you ever done that?
Americans will get offended over anything.
Well, did you ever do a shoey with pee in it?
I could have been one or twice. Bit of piss never hurt nobody.
Yeah,
Good for
look at Lyoto Machida. Yeah, he built his whole career of drinking piss. I was going to say, obviously the walkout music as well. My Heart Will Go On. You said that it's a fucking hit. Are you happy with the way the crowd sort of responded to it? It was probably one of the highlights.
That's why I walk out to. That's why I do stuff like that. I know the crowd will like it. You know.
Did you have any other options or?
I've got a whole. My whole fight career has been. I've been kind of known for my walkout songs. But I suppose it's just now you're in the UFC, everyone gets to see you, you know?
Yeah, well, what are some of the classics that people might have missed out on through your run over at the AFC and just locally here?
Walked out to Call Me Maybe.
Really?
Spice Girls, Wannabe.
Nice.
Venga Boys.
Oh, the Venga Boys.
Which one?
Yes.
Which song? Boom, 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 or whatever that is?
I walked out to that one. I walked out to Ibiza.
Yeah. So basically, this is going to be the trend in the UFC. Every time is going to be a different song. Because I know Tyson Pedro, he's got sexual, and he sticks with that one. You're going to go with different ones, right?
Yeah, I always have I've always had different songs.
I'm just wondering, when did you first hear My Heart Will Go On? Because I remember I was young.
Titanic's one of my favorite movies.
Really? How old were you when you first watched that? You would have been so young, like 5 years old or something.
Would have been something like that. Coyote Ugly back then. My movies, bro.
Yeah.
Coyote Ugly. There's a good song from there as well that you maybe could use for a walk-in. I was gonna say, what did you think of the Titanic? Leanne Rhymes.
Yeah,
that was one of the backups.
Do you remember back in those days they released those CDs? They were like so fresh.
Yeah.
And they had all the classics on there.
All on one CD.
I might track mine down and send it to you in case you need some ideas for the next fight. I was gonna say, what did you think of the Titanic meme that people created with you photoshopped instead of Kate Winslet?
It's hilarious. I love that shit. It's funny.
Do you think there was room for two on that floaty thing at the end of the movie?
Definitely.
She kind of committed homicide, I think, like a sneaky homicide. Trying to cover it up at the end.
I know.
It's 80.
Selfish.
Have you had a chance to look back at the Arlovski fight? What do you think about your performance?
Nah, not really. No, I haven't really yet. But then again, I think it's going to be good. Most fights I don't really get to go back to look at much. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
but I think this fight I'm going to have a lot to look at and work on and go from there.
Because I was going to say, I think I heard you sort of afterwards say that you like to, I guess, look at what you could improve on and do differently. In the past, there hasn't really been a lot of footage. So are you kind of happy that you went, more, you went the distance and you can sort of, I guess, look at yourself and critique yourself, etc. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, I haven't got to look at it properly, but I think there'll be heaps. And it was just it was good to be able to get out there and say fuck you to everyone. You know, everyone's always like, oh, you won't last, shit like that.
So did you have that? You had people that sort of doubted that you could get out of the first round.
Oh, everybody.
Wow.
Heaps of people. To say his fitness won't last and blah blah blah.
Do you think that in sort of a funny way, going the distance and showing how tough and durable you were almost is a better outcome than sort of finishing Arlovski early on in the fight? Sort of
Yeah, for
giving
sure.
that kind of message, yeah.
But then again, I also tried to put him out. He that's where his experience and
What did you think about that? Because I think some people, thought it was a tough challenge. Other people believed he'd go down as soon as you sort of hit him with some of your punches. And you hit him with some doozies in that fight.
Yeah, I tried. I think his experience showed he was blocking in good ways and
head movement.
Yeah, he had real good head movement. But I tried.
Yeah.
I didn't go out there and just try and go the 3 rounds. I tried.
Were you surprised that he didn't try and wrestle you more? Because I remember we spoke to you leading into the fight, and you said, you're probably expecting a sort of wrestling heavy on Andrei Arlovski, like in the Struve fight. He didn't really do that at all.
No. I don't really know. I can't really remember now.
Did you have a bit of an interaction with him? He's a bit of a character. He likes practical jokes. He's an interesting guy. He was, by the way, before the fight, did you see his reaction to the shoey? It looked like he was beyond disgusted. I've never seen Andrei Arlovski so upset. Did you see that? That was crazy.
Yeah.
Did you guys have much of an interaction afterwards?
Not too much. He's old school, so he's made his name, I think. But it is what it is.
How does it feel for you to be number 9 in the UFC rankings?
It's pretty fucking cool, though. But I think I think it's made me want to do a lot more and learn a lot more and stuff like that. So
Really?
I'm excited. Yeah.
So it's kind of motivated you by being at number 9.
Yeah, for sure. It has.
You spoke to us beforehand how you might sort of move to a gym like overseas, or at least do fight camps there, get some more training partners. Is that still the plan?
Yeah, I think it's on the books.
Have you had a think about sort of which camp you might go with? Because last time you said AKA. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I'm not too sure just yet. I don't know how I feel about America just yet.
Oh, really? Based on Chicago?
Well, yeah.
No, just in general. I've always kind of been like that. I like Thailand, but I just need partners. That's all.
Obviously, there's an American kickboxing academy there as well. It's interesting that you mentioned that. So now that you're 9th in the rankings, does it make you because you've never really been the type of guy that really looks at the landscape of the division. You just kind of fight whoever the UFC give you. But have you sort of taken the time to see who's sort of above you and who's in the mix right now?
Nah, not like that. I'm just talking personally myself. I just want to do some stuff. But other than that, I'm gonna fight whoever says to fight. So.
When you say personal stuff, what do you mean by that? Like anything particular
I just want to
training?
learn some new skills and do some stuff and get better.
Yeah.
Just to shock people, I suppose.
And obviously, you're a father, you have a family. What's it like? Did you get a chance to go back home and sort of bask in the victory of UFC 225, or was it sort of straight to Singapore after you made it back?
Yeah, it's been pretty full on there. But after this, I'll be home and just with the family, back at it.
Did you go home at all, or did you go straight from Chicago to Singapore?
I went home.
Yeah.
Went home for a little bit and then come over here. The missus is over here as well, so.
Oh, nice.
She gets to watch her brother and that too, so it's good.
What about the kids? Are they back home?
No, Carter's at home. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's at home by himself. He's one now, so he's got to, grow up sometime.
Just leave him some food in the fridge. Like, you're the man of the house now.
There's a couple bottles on the ground.
Yeah.
Ground. I love it. At least you can reach them. I was going to say it's interesting because you go back in time and we all know that you had the injury and you were out of action quite a while before you made your UFC debut and got into the company. And now you're ranked number 9 and you're in such high demand that you're in Singapore. You don't even get a chance to rest. You're in the Q&As. It seems like a lot of media overseas are taking a big interest in you. What's it like sort of looking back on these last couple of fights and where you are now compared to where you were before that UFC debut?
Well, that's why I said it. A lot of people know I've already done this. In my head, and that is what I went through. I know it sounds weird. People don't understand me, but it's true.
You kind of envisioned this.
Yeah, now it's just happening. Now it's just playing out, and now it's up to me to, get in there and get it done.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm very grateful, and I'm just blessed that I get to do this. But that's on the other thing, There was that year that I was sitting there going through hell. So that's what I think about.
I guess it sort of makes everything a lot more sweeter now. You sort of, after the fight, mentioned that, Ngannou or Derek Lewis, those are some names that sort of interest you. Are you potentially eyeing, maybe the winner or the loser of that fight next?
Oh, I wouldn't mind. I think that would be awesome. I think that would be another good fight. I'm all about good fights and, they're having a go and putting on a show. So even, I see there's Dos Santos and other people. There's a lot of big names that, that can create good fights. So I think it's now I'm just in the mix, so it's even better.
What is it that you like? What is it that you like about Ngannou and sort of Derek Lewis? Why do you think those are good fights?
Well, they're going to go out there and be entertaining. It's going to be a fucking swag, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't you reckon?
Oh, 100%. I mean, their knockout power, your knockout power.
Oh, you're not going to go out there and lay on each other.
Yeah, do you sort of prefer the guys that are going to stand and bang? Because that's kind of what you get with Lewis and Ngannou.
For sure. Obviously, there's the guys, Curtis Blades and other really good guys that really do well at what they do. But as a fighter and as someone who likes to watch people have a fight, I like the whole stand-up side. You know what I mean? Like to be, especially two big fuckers like that. Like, you don't want to go watch them fucking lay around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Speaking of Curtis Blades, what did you think of his victory over Overeem? I know you guys were obviously on the same card in Perth, and I think you told us there was a little bit of a, not altercation, but I think you overheard him saying something, but then he sort of denied it. What was it like seeing him in Chicago and his performance? What did you think of it?
I think he did really well in his fight, but then again, he does good at what he does. And it works for him, and now he's number 2. He's up there. He gets to fight either the champion or someone like that.
What was it like being? Did you see him much? What was it like being around him again?
I don't really care.
All water under the bridge,
if
right?
there's a problem with anyone, I don't really care. We can sort it out.
Yeah.
What do you think about the big matchup coming up between DC and Stipe? I mean, Stipe is on the show this week. He's really excited about it. It's a big super fight for him. Is this going to be a fight where you'll actually tune in and watch it?
I forgot that I was on, but yeah, for sure, I want to watch it.
Who do you think's going to get it?
That's a good question. I think Stipe might come out on top. It's because he's been bigger for a while, you know what I mean? Old DC was an old heavyweight, back then.
I was going to say, how much do you think the size difference will sort of play a factor? Because, I guess you're a guy who's like maybe not the biggest of heavyweights, and you go in there and you beat a guy like Arlovski, who's obviously 6'4". Do you think there's any similarities in terms of DC being the smaller guy, but obviously having that wrestling advantage? I think that could be a crazy factor.
Yeah, that's the way he will win it. If he goes out there and. But like I said, I don't really look into fights that much. I don't really care about fights that much. I just think, fuck, as long as they go out there and have a good show and That's all that matters to me.
Do you reckon that's kind of an advantage for you, that you don't really, see what anyone else is doing? You don't really follow fights, kind of keeps your head clear? Or do you reckon that is something you'll start doing? Maybe, if you go to an AKA or a different gym, you might start watching tape.
Not really. It's just me. Like, I don't really. At the end of the day, we're gonna go out there and we're gonna fight. And I don't know. I'm just, fuck. I'm not like everyone else, I suppose.
Yeah.
Just on that, it's interesting because people are looking at Brock Lesnar possibly coming in and challenging the winner of Stipe and DC next, and sort of Curtis sort of taking a backseat to that. What would you think if you saw Brock Lesnar back in the mix? Would you be in favor of seeing him back, especially what happened last time with the controversy around him?
It's a money fight. I'm in this for the money. Like, I'm in this so my family can do good, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
Of course, the money. Obviously, who wouldn't want to fight Brock Lesnar? And I'd love to get one back on him for my boy. So.
I was gonna say, would that be part of the motivation, sort of because of what happened with Mark Hunt? You'd want to beat him.
There's all them boys that I want to get, some payback for. Over him, all them boys. I was there in the corner, you know what I mean? So.
Wow.
I think of that as well.
How hard was that for you watching? Because obviously UFC 209, Overeem and Hunt, that would have been really tough for you to see.
Oh, but at the end of the day, that's the sport.
Yeah.
That's what you go out there and fight and fuck. That's what happens. You can either win, and it's the best sport in the world, or you get knocked the fuck out and then losers eat shit.
I guess it's interesting because with Mark Hunt, you sort of get the sense that he wouldn't want to fight Lesnar again because of all the, trouble that it caused, and obviously he's massively against cheaters. You being a guy who's close with Mark Hunt, you wouldn't have any sort of hesitation. You'd still want to fight Brock Lesnar, even though there'd be the risk of, him failing a drug test.
Everyone knows he's fucking on the juice. That's not. You can ask a 10-year-old kid and they'll probably tell you that. You know what I mean? It's not. It's obvious. He's probably one of the biggest humans I've ever seen in real life. He's huge. But that doesn't mean if I'm going to get paid, I'm going to get paid. And I'll fight him.
Speaking of getting paid, you mentioned that you were looking to possibly renegotiate your contract a little bit with UFC after you pick up a few more wins. Do you feel like you're there now, or is it still a couple of fights away that you... Yeah. Is that something that you'll try and sort of figure out with them before you get your next fight? To me, it kind of feels like you'll be headlining a card here in Australia sometime soon. So is that something you want to sit down and chat to them about?
Oh, yeah. I'm coming for it. I'm not just doing this for no reason, you know what I mean?
How many fights do you have on your contract left?
Well, I just signed I've signed a new contract every fight.
Oh, so you're just on like a one-fight contract?
No, well, I just keep saying if I win, I want to sign a new one.
Oh, wow. And they've been open. They've been receptive to it. They're happy to do it, to give you new deals.
Yeah, I think they have. They've been pretty good. But that's what I said. My manager should be here today, and we'll sit down and go over a few things and go from there.
I know you're sort of basking in the glory of this win, but when do you think you'd like to get back in there? What is a sort of rough timeline for you?
Nothing really 100% right now. I've got a couple of injuries I got to fix and little shit like that. But when I'm ready, I'll be back for sure.
What sort of injuries? Anything serious?
Nah, nothing serious. Just little shit that's been happening over years and that stuff like that.
So nothing that requires surgery. Is it safe to say you'll fight again this year?
Oh, yeah, I'll fight again this year.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, as we wrap up, it would be fitting to see you headline a card in Sydney. Would that be sort of your next aim, headlining a local card here in Australia for the UFC in front of your crowd in Sydney?
If I could headline a card in Sydney, that'll be one of the top things for someone like me. Just to fill out a place in Sydney that's my hometown, you know what I mean? That'd be crazy. Some people only dream of.
Yeah, you being like an iconic Western Sydney guy, that'd be amazing. Is it safe to say you'd rather that than, say, doing a Las Vegas card? Because a lot of people say, Vegas is good for exposure, but for you it's kind of more important to represent.
Yeah, I'd rather fight Penrith than someone. Yeah, for sure. I'd rather fight in Sydney and and have all of Western Sydney there. And like I said, overseas is good as well. Same to me. Anyway, if I'm getting in there somewhere, I'm going to fight regardless.
Well, it's going to be exciting. Shoey's all around in Sydney. If that happens, guys, make sure to follow him at Bam Bam Tuivasa on Twitter. Any final messages for the fans, Tai, as we let you go?
Thank you for the support, guys. I appreciate it. S.A. FTA.
Thank you so much for your time, Tai, and good luck to Tyson. Obviously, I know he's there, sort of near the buffet, but have fun over in Singapore, and good luck in the Q&A, man.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks,
cheers,
Tai.
boys.
Bye-bye.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Demetrius Johnson, the UFC flyweight champion of the world, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is one of the baddest, or the baddest man on the planet, but also one of the nicest guys as well. The most winningest UFC heavyweight of all time. Of course, I'm talking about him being the champ. He takes on Daniel Cormier at UFC 226 in a super fight. The heavyweight champ himself, Stipe Miocic, who also is, by the way, about to be a dad. Say what? Stipe, thanks for taking the time. How are you today?
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure having you come back, man. It's a crazy time right now in your life. You're preparing to take on Daniel Cormier in a couple of weeks. You're expecting your first child shortly after that. Not to mention, obviously, your job as a firefighter and paramedic. What's it been like for you, and how are you handling, all of that at the same time?
Oh, it's never ending. Never a dull moment in my life. But listen, I love it. I love being busy. I'm excited for everything to happen. I'm excited for the fight, but more excited for my first child.
So are you still working the same schedule like you were before with the paramedic firefighter thing? Or did you, and also what happens sort of in these final weeks leading into the fight? Do you, like right now, you definitely right now you're not working, right? Are you still doing some shifts?
No, I was supposed to actually work this Saturday, but I actually had a wedding, so I had to call off.
You getting married again? I thought you already had a wife.
No, one of my friends were getting married, and I just screwed up my schedule, so I had to actually give it away. So it was my last shift would have been this Saturday, but I cannot do it. So that's my last shift before the fight.
Do
they worked the week before? So.
Do they ever do like a bit of a send-off for you? Because obviously you're going in title fights, you're close with everyone there at the fire station, obviously everybody with the paramedics. Did they do a big thing of it, and did you kind of miss out on that this time around?
No, not at all. No. They just, they call me, text me if I see them. They say, hey, good luck, do your thing, and I'll see you when you get back.
I mean, every time you come on, we ask you about what people's reactions are like when the baddest man on the planet comes to resuscitate their cousin, but at this point, I mean, you are a massive, massive celebrity, especially in your hometown over there. What is the reaction when you rock up to help a cat get down from a tree? I mean, it would be unbelievable for a fan to have this happen.
I mean, I'm not a celebrity, but it's cool. I get a lot when I go to the hospital. A lot of doctors and nurses and stuff like that, medics, they all want to take pictures, so it's pretty cool.
Someone's passing away on the side and they have to resuscitate them, but they want to get a quick selfie.
We make sure to take care of them.
I feel like someone, if someone was sort of on their way out, they see the champ and they're like, all right, I'm back. I'm not missing out on this. I was gonna say though, I feel like the big thing for you is this baby. How is it like? Have you had to sort of baby proof the house, and have you had to do a bunch of things around the house and sort of prepare for the baby, build a nursery, things like that?
Yeah, we actually already did it. We did it way a while back, probably 2 months before camp really started hitting hard. We got the nursery done. Baby proofing the house, and I'm still doing stuff. We get stuff in the mail, like from our baby shower, and I'll put it together. It's not a lot of stuff, but it's great. My wife's awesome. She helps me with a lot of that. I know she's pregnant, but she does the best she can. But whatever, all the manual stuff, like stuff, like putting stuff together, I'll do it.
How's she handling the pregnancy?
She's good. I mean, she's a trooper. She's getting big, and especially if it's super hot summer.
Yeah.
So it sucks for her. So she's got another 7, 8 weeks. So yay.
We have to talk about names for a second. Have you guys locked down a name? Some people will have a baby. It'll take some time. The baby will be unnamed for a period of time. It'll be like a new Hollywood movie that has been unnamed. Other people have a name ready as soon as the baby pops out. What are you thinking here? Are there a few names circling around in your head? Are you guys sort of down to the last candidates?
Yeah, we're down a couple. We don't know yet. We don't want to say anything. We'll keep it to the heart right now because we have a lot of names, but we just don't know yet. we're gonna figure it out. I think once we see her, we'll know what to call it.
What are some of the names that just didn't make the cut? Like you heard them and you're like, there's no way. Like for example, I've never been a big Kimberly fan. Like I've never met a Kimberly that I've liked. Have you ever had like a name thrown at you that you're like, I don't know about this name?
No, I mean, my wife's pretty much, my wife said, I told her, we have a daughter, you can name whatever you want. I'll give you my 2 cents. And we have a son, I'm going to name what I want, And she was okay with that. But she picked up good names, names she thought about, I really like, So, I'll give my 2 cents. She had a couple of them, the names she gave, I put them in order, which ones I like. So we'll see once we see her and figure it out.
What was her reaction to you taking the fight, in the middle of the pregnancy? Because I feel like originally after UFC 220, you sort of wanted to take a bit of a break, and then this fight came around. What was her reaction? Was she like, oh man, I didn't see this coming?
No. I made sure it was okay with her. That was the main thing. I made sure it was okay with her. I was like, listen, you want me to do this or no? I can say no, I don't have to. And no, she's like, no, let's do it. You're good. It's before the baby's born, so we're good. Like that, you're good.
What sort of made you want to take this fight instead of sort of taking a bit of a break?
It was just an experience being an Ultimate Fighter, talking to Daniel and making sure it was okay with him and okay with me, make sure we're on the same page. And, it's a super fight, make sure we're both doing what we're supposed to. And, I think the Ultimate Fighter just learning, I learned a lot about myself during that TV show.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I mean, not only were you super busy with everything, but you also did The Ultimate Fighter. And also, sir, quite possibly that is going to be the last season of The Ultimate Fighter. So that's a bit of history as well. How did you like doing the show? Because we watched it, and I mean, it just seems like it's a lot of work. You really cared about your fighters. You sort of have to go through an emotional experience every time that they fight. It seems like there's, a lot on the plate when you do this kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure, no question. I mean, it's just you want nothing but the best for these kids, and that's all I cared about, and just making sure they got everything they were supposed to get out of it. And I wish all of them could win, but they can't. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. But I think they learned a lot, and I think that's all I care about. Make sure they became better and improve themselves to go on to the next step of their journey.
Well, what would you say is the biggest thing you learned about Daniel, sort of being around him all those days, and being filmed on Tough?
I think he just he knows how to coach. That's one thing I wasn't used to was coaching. I just didn't know how to react and do practice and stuff because I've never done that. I can run a practice, but just. I think now I feel comfortable in running practice and knowing what to do and what can we do. He just he was very he's done it all. So it's he knows what he's a head coach now of a high school wrestling team, so he knows what's going on.
What I liked about it was you guys had a really fun relationship. Like you could tell both of you respected each other. There was a lot of jokes, laughing. Did you sort of? It looked like you sort of almost enjoyed sort of being around him and spending some time with him.
Yeah, no, for sure. I didn't see him all the time. We see each other in between we're leaving, they're coming in for practice, and stuff like that. So it was never, too much. It was never I didn't see him all the time. But it was fun to be around him. Got to hang out with him. It wasn't around too much.
Is it?
I was going to say, Cass, but the guys at the Firehouse, they'd be watching the show and they'd be going, what kind of pranks will Stipe be pulling here? Did you get any complaints from the boys at the Firehouse about? So, why wasn't there oil put on his water? That kind of stuff. Shaving cream. There was a lack of it.
No, yeah, I think I just really got to focus on training the kids. I just wanted to make sure they got the best experience. It wasn't about me. It was about them.
Yeah. When I know, with you and Daniel, it's so respectful. Is it almost weird fighting a guy who, you do get along with so well? Because it's probably pretty contrastingly to sort of the Ngannou build-up, which is a little bit somewhat heated from Ngannou's end.
No, not at all. I mean, it's business. He's gonna try to beat the shit out of me. I'm gonna try to beat the shit out of him. Yeah.
Do you sort of get a little? Do you get a little bit of confidence, I guess, when you guys square off and there is such a huge height advantage and you're sort of towering over him?
No. I mean, listen, he's a tough fighter. He's fought the best guys in the world. He's fought at heavyweight. He's undefeated at heavyweight. He's fought the best guys at 205 and he's beat the best guys at 205. So, I mean, you can't take him light. No matter size doesn't matter. It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog.
It's interesting because you've had so many great matchups in your run as the UFC champion, but it almost feels like this is kind of the big fight that a lot of fans have been waiting to see you have. You fought some incredibly tough guys like Ngannou and Overeem and some big names like that. But are you excited to sort of be in a quote-unquote super fight and the biggest sort of in July, the biggest time to sort of the UFC does a pay-per-view?
Yeah, man, it's exciting. It's a different experience. And the guy come up trying to take my belt. I mean, nothing's gonna change. I'm gonna walk out with the belt still wrapped around my waist, and still nothing's gonna change about that. He's a great fighter, but he's not taking what I've earned. We'll work too hard, I sacrifice too much for that belt, and it's gonna be a great time. A great opportunity. It's gonna be amazing to do the super fight. People love it, and people want to see it. It's a big thing right now. So why not? Let's have some fun.
Yeah, 100%. We heard that DC called you when this fight was coming together and sort of you guys spoke about how, you both needed to be paid properly in order for this to happen. The wives were in the background like, yeah, 100%. Is that true?
Yeah.
What was that conversation 100%. Like?
Oh, no, just make sure it's right for both of us. We're going to just do it, do it. Listen, also, they're going to, we just make sure that was the right thing to do. That's it, pretty much, hands down.
Are you happy with the deal that you've got ahead of this fight?
100%.
Is that an indicator that sort of your relationship with the UFC is a little bit better than times in the past?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, listen, man, it's my boss. They're my employer, so no one's ever happy with their employer.
Yeah. You said that obviously nothing heals overnight. What I guess would make it sort of, bring that relationship to 100% if anything sort of needed to happen or change?
Well, I think just stuff both work on both sides, Where no one's perfect. I'm not perfect, just gets time, it takes time.
What do you think? A lot of people are talking about legacies here. A lot of people are already sort of talking about you as being one of the greatest pound-for-pound heavyweights of all time. There's some names in there. There's guys like Fedor. There's a lot of other big names, but a lot of people are talking about what you've done with the title and with your defenses is obviously groundbreaking and history-breaking. What do you think this fight does for your legacy? Because it is a super fight. It is a big fight against Daniel Cormier. What do you think it does for it?
I think it makes it look stronger, I guess. I mean, I'm not worried about that, man. All I care about is, July 7th and winning. That's all that's on my mind, and you gotta keep winning, and then the more you win, the better it gets. So it's all I care about is winning. I love winning. I don't like losing.
I heard you in an interview say that fighting is fun for you. What? And I don't know why. Like it wasn't surprising, but the way you said it, it was like, what do you like about this fight? And you're like, fighting's fun. What I guess would you say is the most fun part for you?
Winning, of course.
But what about like while you're in the cage? Do you just enjoy the work?
I love what I do. Yeah, I just love what I do. It's like I know I fight and everything. It sucks getting punched, but it's just fun to do. It just keeps me out of trouble. I just love doing it. It's fun. The minute I stop having fun is the minute I'm out.
Do you remember like a time in a fight where you sort of thought to yourself like, damn, I'm having a lot of fun in here? Was there ever a moment like that? I imagine you're concentrating a lot, but do you remember?
No, not so much that. Just enjoy the experience. The week gonna fight, hang out with my coaches. Just get ready for the fight, the hype, the build up. Everything about it. Just like you said, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Did you ever get into any street fights like before becoming a professional fighter?
I think I got one when I was 11 years old.
Really?
Wow. Like that at me. I got crushed.
Who by?
I remember a guy. I think the guy's name was Guy. He crushed me. I felt bad. I threw water in his face, joking around. And he didn't like it too much, and he was older than me and beat the crap out of me.
Oh wow!
Do you see this guy walking around now, and what's his reaction now that you're the baddest man on the planet?
Nothing. I don't care. I mean, it is what it is.
Haven't given him a Facebook stalk. We won't tell anyone.
No, I don't even know where he is now. I don't know if he lives in the state anymore.
How come you avoided all these fights? I feel because you're a Midwest guy. I feel like there'd be. I don't know. I feel like there's sometimes like trouble around there and people get into fights. How come you manage to avoid them?
I'm not a dickhead.
Yeah.
Nice guy.
Yeah.
I just try to be, if there was a fight, just, talk my way out of it, or just no reason to throw down, just, always a way around it.
I love it. That should be put on a T-shirt. Don't be a dickheck. That's the new Stipe Reebok T-shirt. Tai Tuivasa got the shoey. You get the Don't be a dickhead T-shirt.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about what you thought about Curtis Blades' performance at UFC 225. Obviously, he got that big win over him. A lot of people are sort of saying he could possibly be fighting you next. Were you impressed with what you saw?
I didn't even watch it.
Really? Why not?
I was playing Fortnite.
Well, now that you bring it up, Fortnite, I mean, I see from time to time you challenging different personalities to Fortnite. Who have you been playing Fortnite with? Have you played any celebrities or sports stars?
No really,
one's taking you up on the challenge.
Nah, I'm not. I mean, I'm okay. I'm not like a phenomenal player like some of the other guys. I just like I love having fun,
Do you go solo? Do you go in a squad? What's your preferred method of play?
I go squad. I play with a couple of my buddies, so it's fun, you know. But yeah, with the Curtis Blades fight though, I heard he looked good. He's a great fighter. I trained with him before. He's a tough guy.
Do you think you will watch that fight at some point?
Oh, of course. Yeah, if we do fight him, I would definitely watch it.
I guess it might be hard to say, but afterwards he called out basically that he's the next guy in line, and he's got a pretty good resume, obviously beating Mark Hunt, now knocking out over him. Do you see him as sort of the next title contender?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Right now, I'm all worried about July 7th. That's all I care about.
Can I ask though, because even I know, like fighters obviously have that, you know, the tunnel vision, and all they focus on is their next fight. But there are rumors about Brock Lesnar potentially being, you know, the guy to challenge either you or Daniel. What do you think about that?
Honestly, yeah, I heard about that too, and they've talked about it before at that press conference. But like I said, you know, all I care about is July 7th. You know, July 7th. July 7th. You know, International Fight Week. That 226. That's all I care about. That's all I got my mind on. And after that, I'll worry about it after. Then I'll worry about my daughter being born.
Yeah. Will you take a break though after 226? Because you got the daughter, and that's in August.
Yeah, I hope so.
I
plan on it. I mean, it's a plan. I mean, I'm gonna enjoy my daughter, hanging out with her, and getting to know her.
What if the UFC, you know, because obviously with this fight, this was a quick turnaround. You know, you beat Ngannou, and then almost straight away they're like, "Hey, we want you to do tough and fight Cormier." What if straight after this one they start asking about a Lesnar fight and they want you to fight again? Would you entertain the idea?
Yeah, not right now. Yeah, I'll do it, but not right away.
Do you think you'd be open to fighting this year by any chance, or do you think more than likely you'd want to spend time with the daughter maybe next year?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm not gonna think about it. We're worried about July 7th. That's all I care about.
Sure.
Honestly.
What did you think of Daniel Cormier's face when he found out that he could possibly be fighting Brock Lesnar? Because I've never seen a man in so much happiness before.
He's got to worry about me though. It's a different. I mean.
I know. Well, it seems like Brock Lesnar's like a dream for him. I mean, it's interesting because Curtis Blades, he's a guy with a remarkable resume. Well, not a remarkable resume, but he's got a pretty solid resume considering the other heavyweights that are in the division. But then here's another guy who everybody would tune in to watch you fight this guy. I mean, you've got the tunnel vision, you focus on this fight, but at this point in your career, are you at the point where you're sort of looking to fight tougher guys like Curtis Blades, or would you be more sort of drawn into the fact that you'd be making a huge payday fighting a guy like Brock Lesnar?
Honestly, yeah, everyone's tough. It doesn't matter. Anyone can win at any given night. You know, it's a fight game. You know, anything can happen. But honestly, like I said, I don't really care about what's happening outside of it right now. My focus is on July 7th. I'll tell you over and over again. That's all I care about. I don't care about what
We're just testing
after.
you. We want to make sure. We want to make sure you're being honest about it.
No,
I think you do care about July 7th now.
That's it, man. That's it, man. That's all I keep thinking about. You know, good for Brock, good for Curtis. You know, wish something for the best for him. But right now, all I care about is DC, July 7th.
Yeah, we'll talk about the matchup to us because DC is an incredibly tough individual. How do you see yourself sort of matching up with him? Because you're a great wrestler. Your striking is really, really impressive. Your movement, your footwork, it's right out there. Whereas I suppose DC, his biggest strength is he's super durable, super tough. He has some striking, but, you know, he does excel in the area of wrestling. How do you see yourself matching up with him?
I match up well. You know, I think I match up very well. I think it's a great matchup for me. If it wasn't, I wouldn't have probably taken the fight. No, but I'm a bad matchup for anyone. And you know, I know he's got great wrestling, but you know, it's not gonna be a wrestling match. It's a mixed martial arts. You know, so I get to punch him too. You know, and you know, he's a tough guy, and you know, he comes forward. But I think you know, I have a lot of answers that when he comes forward, I have an answer for everything.
What do you think is sort of the biggest challenge when overcoming, you know, a challenge like Daniel Cormier? Is it his wrestling, or is it his striking, or is it just, I guess, his ability to put everything together?
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's just a tough guy. You know, he just knows what to do, how to win. You know, he finds ways to win. But so do I. So you know, it's gonna be an interesting fight. It's gonna be a great fight. But I'm coming out on top. I guarantee it. I'll tell you right now.
Do you think it's a little bit unfair that sometimes people criticize Daniel because of this whole John Jones thing, the fact that, you know, John has beaten him? Do you think there's sort of sometimes people don't really recognize what he's done in the division because he's had an incredible run and he's a super, super durable, super tough champion, a very dangerous fighter?
Oh, yeah, I think 100%. I think he's super tough. You know, and I don't think he worries about that too much. I think he's worried about winning. That's all he cares about, too.
Well, there you go. In a second, Stipe. I know, like with the Ngannou fight, it was a really grueling fight. It was really, really back and forth. And I know fighters always say, I'm preparing for 5 rounds, even if they are, say, a knockout artist, even if they can put guys away. But with Daniel's background and with your background, are you sort of going to this one expecting that, this is probably going to be another 5-round, grueling war as well?
Look at every fight, 5 rounds. If I catch him and he goes down early, even better. Call it a quick night, but. Look for 5. I train for 5. I'm going for 25 minutes hard.
I guess the other question is who's putting the belt around you once it's all said and done? Will you let Dana White put the belt around you this time around?
You'll find out when I win the belt when they raise my hand. You'll find out.
Are you flying LeBron James down? Are you not telling us something here, Stipe?
No, not at all.
Is this because just quickly on LeBron? For fun question, where do you think he's going next season? Is he sticking with you guys?
I hope he stays with Cleveland. If not, he doesn't. It is what it is. But
is J.R. Smith welcome to come to your fights?
Yeah, J.R.'s actually a really nice guy. They're all nice guys. But yeah, I don't know where LeBron's gonna go. I hope he does stay. If not, whoever's best for him and his family.
There you guys go. One of the nicest guys in the game. Speaking of games, just quickly, how long are you playing Fortnite? Are you playing Fortnite right up to the fight? What do people need to look out for when they're playing Fortnite? Are you on the microphone? Give us a little hint.
I stitch it. I do a little twitch. Twitch it.
Awesome. Well, people need to jump on, subscribe to the Twitch. Of course, follow Stipe on Twitter and Instagram at Stipe Miocic. And check out the big fight July 7th, 8th here in Australia. Takes on Daniel Cormier at UFC 226. Super packed card. A massive, massive fight. Really happy for you, man. It's all happening for you. All the best to you and your family, the wife. And we can't wait to see what happens next. Thanks so much for taking the time, Stipe.
Hey, no, thanks for having me out, man. Great talking to you guys again.
Awesome. Thanks, Steven.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest from his incredible work with MMA Fighting, the Wrestling Observer newsletter, and so much more. He is one of the most trusted voices when it comes to the goings-on of the pro wrestling and MMA world. He joins us back here on Submission Radio. Dave Meltzer, welcome back, man. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
We're good as well, Dave, especially now that you're here on the program. There's a lot happening in the MMA world, but the first thing I want to touch on with you are these numbers surrounding UFC 225. We saw figures as low as 150,000 pay-per-view buys, but you put out an article in MMA Fighting recently, and you talked about the fact that it's much higher, 250, around that range. Can you talk to us a little bit about what were the pay-per-view buys for UFC 225?
Yeah, I saw the original thing of 150, and it sounded really low to me. But you never know. Pay-per-view numbers you kind of can. I'm pretty decent at figuring them. I thought this would do 225, just kind of as a gut feeling. So 150, when I heard it, I goes, oh, that's bad news. This is too good of a card to do that. And then I checked around, and there was people in the 250 to 275, even as high as 280 range. And then it kind of settled in, and 250 is where it's looking. So it's it's about where it should be given the card. There were that UFCs are usually doing 200 to 300 right now. A week show like the one that was in Australia, because you had the Luke Rockhold Romero fight didn't do well, and the Amanda Nunes headline show in Brazil, which we knew did tank. But most of your shows are in that range, so it was right in the middle of the range.
So, Dave, what do you make of the actual numbers themselves? If they are around the 280 range, what does that tell you? And I guess one of the other questions is, why didn't CM Punk's impact, why wasn't it as big as UFC 203?
The numbers were probably a little slightly above what I expected, because I really didn't expect CM Punk to mean anything, really, the second time. I think that it was a curiosity thing. I think people... It was just a curiosity, and people already had their answer that he wasn't going to do well in UFC, and bringing in a weak opponent to perhaps give him a win, which also didn't happen. I think that it was a one-time thing. If he had won the first fight and looked really good in winning, I think that he would have drawn a lot better the second time, but that didn't happen.
It's interesting as well, because the prelims were pretty stacked. It looks like they allegedly only got around 667,000 viewers. Which is a pretty average outcome. Why do you think the prelims didn't do any better? There were some big fights on there, and it seemed like the MMA world was kind of buzzing about these prelims, talking about how it's better than most other cards that the UFC has done.
Yeah, I thought the prelim number was disappointing, because of the Overeem fight. A little bit the Esparza fight. of course, some of the best prelims were on Fight Pass, though, to me. I mean, the Sergio Pettis-Benavidez fight was really big, and that was on Fight Pass, not on TV. But, yeah, I expected the TV number to be a little bit higher, but it just didn't happen for whatever reason.
And sorry to jump in, Cass, but I'm just wondering, Dave, when you see something like this, and I mean, of course, we're looking at these numbers closely. The MMA community is looking at these numbers closely. Some hardcore fans are looking at these numbers closely. But you imagine the UFC would be the ones who are looking the closest at the result of this pay-per-view. It seemed like Dana White was really proud of what they had going with this pay-per-view and the prelim card. Is this a lesson for them? Do you think they take away from this and maybe try and stack bigger names and main events and sort of have these cards where you don't have as much name recognition throughout them? Do you think that's the lesson learned for them here? What do you think they sort of take away from this going forward?
I just think it's business as usual, because when you're having this many pay-per-view cards and you're having this many cards, you kind of, there's how much, like what matches do they have that they could put in, and they're kind of limited. The pay-per-view is really going to draw. I think the lesson is the pay-per-view is really going to draw based on the top 2 or 3 matches. The idea of a stacked undercard is well and good, but it seems it's like people are gravitating towards MMA fights now. It's not overseeing like 8 good fights. It's about seeing one fight that's really hyped with guys that they know, and then they'll stick around and watch the whole show. I mean, I think that's the lesson, that a deep show, and this was a deep show, didn't do as well. It did about as well on pay-per-view as I expected. It didn't do as well on TV as I expected. And it's just they didn't capture the imagination of the public. It was good shows it was good fights for a fan who knows everyone and saw a lot of even fights, or Blades and Overeem is an interesting fight and things like that. But to the average person, they're waiting for. Unfortunately, they're waiting for Conor McGregor, and and maybe Stipe Miocic and Cormier is big enough to get those type of people in. But Robert Whittaker and Romero wasn't going to be big enough.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say,
especially when I don't know how much the losing of the championship fight aspect of that match hurt, because I don't think it helped at all. That's for sure.
Well, just on Miocic and Cormier, how do you think that'll compare? Because in Ngannou and Miocic, there was a bit of rivalry there, and I think a lot of people were curious about how well Ngannou would do. Some people thought he would win. Whereas with Cormier and Miocic, it's a really, really respectful build-up. Like, neither guy's going to talk trash about each other. Yes, it's a super fight. Do you think it'll do better than 220?
The pay-per-view 220. I think it's going to do better because, July is usually really big, although last July wasn't. But traditionally the July show does well, and it's got a deep undercard. So I know they're hoping for 5. To me,
5 would be huge.
5 would be a big success. I think 4 sounds closer to how they're going to do, unless something big happens. But I don't think it will, because what pops these crowds, in the last couple of days, where is like a big grudge, and I don't think that's going to happen here. I think it's going to be 2 guys talking about going out there and having a sportsman-like athletic contest, and there is interest. I mean, it is champion versus champion, and they're both really good, well-known fighters. So, I just think that I think that I think that they're not going to get that big last 3-day pop that sometimes you get when there's a crazy incident that happens backstage that all of a sudden people think, hey, we're going to get a really big grudge match.
And it is a super fight, obviously light heavyweight champion versus the heavyweight champion, but it's kind of crazy that, this is being dubbed as a super fight, and we may only see it draw about 400,000 pay-per-views, which, in the past, super fight meant something a little bit different. But just sort of going back to CM Punk, given the fact that, all right, his role in the UFC was always heavily criticized, but at least at UFC 203, he backed it up in a sense by bringing in the numbers. Now, this time around, he didn't, and it wasn't a great fight. Do you think it was a mistake, and especially the second time around having him back in there? Because it didn't really do much for the UFC at all.
I think it helped slightly, but I mean, as far as I don't want to go so far as to say a mistake business-wise, but it wasn't a big plus. Certainly, when it was over, I think I don't think it did them any favors. I think that the perception of everything was kind of negative, because it's kind of like you put guys in that didn't deserve to be in, and it's one thing if it creates this big giant buzz like it did the first time. But this time, I didn't think it would create a buzz. I think people had already seen Punk, and I think it had been too long. Also, like if Punk had come back like 6 months later, and you saw like videos and he's training and things like that. But we really didn't see him. He really didn't promote it because he had the trial going on. I think that hurt a lot too. Is when he should have been running around promoting this fight, he was in court every day, and I think that the people who knew he was in court every day kind of were like, what kind of shape is this guy going to be in when his last week of training he's in court? And if you've ever been in a lawsuit, you know that like the weeks leading up to the lawsuit, you're not exactly going to be doing your optimum training either. So it was like, I think that probably didn't help matters either, is that people kind of knew that, how's he going to fight when he's got something else on his mind right now? I mean, he really should have canceled the fight and fought like a couple months later. But I'm sure UFC wanted it in Chicago because it's his hometown.
Do you think we see him back in the WWE potentially at September? He seemed kind of, sort of open to it, maybe leading into the fight.
Not WWE, no. Professional wrestling, probably not, but WWE, I would say, if it's going to happen, it's going to be 5-10 years from now, and may never happen. There's a lot of, and the trial didn't help any. There's a lot of bad blood there, and for good reasons on both, and honestly on both sides.
Apparently, a lot of rumors around this Olin show, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Let's talk about Colby Covington, because this guy is now the interim champion. You mentioned your article on MMA Fighting how interim championships don't necessarily really draw the crowds when it comes to pay-per-view. What do you think of him? Because a lot of fans we talk to are a little bit turned off by him because he kind of, for them, overdoes it. Sometimes some of the stuff that he says seems kind of planned out and scripted. And I mean, you know what a good promo sounds like. We've seen them over and over in the world of pro wrestling. Do you think he's sort of missing the mark a little bit? Is he actually turning fans off at some points when he speaks? What do you make of him?
I don't think he's a turnoff, but I don't think he's a big draw. I think he tries too hard, and I think nobody buys it. I think everyone knows it's an act, and that's why it's not really working. We were with Chael Sonnen, it was kind of like, I think deep down people knew it was an act, but they wanted to believe it wasn't. And with him, it's like nobody wants to believe that it is. But is that, for a fighter, you got to get attention, and attention isn't the easiest thing to get when you're an unknown fighter. I think it has gotten him attention. I think it's a little bit, it's not a negative to him in the sense that he probably got this fight based on his talking. Obviously, the championship fight he's going to get based on his winning. But I think the talking kind of gave him, more exposure and more talk. And when you do that, you get more opportunity. So I think it's been a positive for him, but not a great positive. And if he becomes champion, I would certainly advise him to be more selective, I suppose, in what he says. But when you're champion, you can kind of get away with that a little bit more. But I think that you also want to be, you don't want to be like that people are. I don't think you want the complete negativity that he sometimes gets.
Yeah. I think that one of the interesting things, he sort of managed to draw out Tyron Woodley as a contender and not as a super fight, which has sort of been tough in the past, where Woodley's sort of been focused on the Nate Diaz, the GSPs, the Conor McGregors, and then whoever's the number one contender, he doesn't really care. Whereas now, Woodley's sort of all aboard, and he really wants this fight. He wants to, beat up Colby Covington. I'm curious to see, what happens with Colby Covington with Donald Trump, or he wants to sort of take the belt to his office. That could be a good way for him to get exposure. Are you curious about some of the crazy things that'll happen with Covington and Tyron Woodley in terms of the promos? A lot of people think that maybe it's going to be this all-out, essentially, race war with Colby Covington playing the sort of, the I guess, conservative side, Woodley playing, I guess, a different side. Are you curious about that sense, Dave?
I hope it doesn't become a race war, because that's not a good thing in any way, shape, or form. I do think because they kind of know each other, they both have the wrestling background. I do expect them to have some really good promos back and forth. I mean, I think from what I've seen, it's helped with Woodley, and that's a positive for the build of this fight, because if Woodley's going to talk more and spend more time with the media, it'll be a positive for the show. Because, again, Woodley versus Covington, if this fight had happened a year ago, I don't think anyone would have cared. And I think people will in this specific case, I think they're going to care a lot more than they would have a year ago. So in that sense, the Covington thing's worked, and it's also worked because it's gotten, Woodley reacting, which, before he wasn't reacting enough.
It's going to be fascinating because I know fans aren't really sold on Woodley. A lot of them like to boo him when he comes out, and obviously we saw the reaction that Covington gets. It's going to be interesting to see who ends up being the heel, the face, who's going to like who, who the crowd's going to back by the end of it. It's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out.
I got to think people are going to cheer Woodley. I think that Covington has I think there's the thing about Covington that he does is something that the average person does want to see him get beat, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I think that's where Mayweather drew a ton, was because I think a lot of that audience wanted to see him get beat.
Well, let's talk about the other flip side of that coin, Robert Whittaker. I mean, we mentioned him before fighting Yoel Romero. Obviously, Yoel wasn't fighting for the title. You mentioned how they might have heard the pay-per-view buys, but what do you make of Rob? Because obviously here in Australia, we all know him. We buy pay-per-views because he's one of our own. He's also big in New Zealand because he was born there. But overseas, what kind of clout does he have? What kind of champion draw do you think he is now after this latest fight with Yoel Romero?
Well, the problem is I mean, I think that the thing that hurts is that he didn't have this big signature win to get the championship. I mean, he had a nice win over Yoel Romero to, the first one, to establish himself as a top guy. But then, like, if he'd beaten George St. Pierre, I think he would be much bigger than he is now.
Yeah.
But that fight never happened, so it hurt him. I think if he'd beaten Luke Rockhold, he'd be a lot bigger than he is right now. Beating Romero this time is tough because really half the people or more think that Romero won the fight, or it's a split bat thing at the end. It was a debatable thing. So I don't think that really helped him that much. I think that I think he'll need time. If he gets like 3 or 4 wins in a row, people will forget that this is a close fight, and they'll start respecting him more as a champion. Because again, he didn't beat the champion, and his first title defense, was very, very close. So I don't, I think it's going to take time in the United States and Canada.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I want to get your thoughts on how you scored the fight, just out of curiosity, and also what do you want to sort of see next for Whittaker? Because I feel like the UFC, considering that he does hold not necessarily the keys, but he is a part of a pay-per-view market in Australia, there is no incentive for them to ever do Romero Whittaker 3, because obviously the first one didn't draw well, the second one didn't draw great, and if you're going to invest in anyone, do you want to invest in a young guy who's got a pay-per-view market behind him, or do you want to invest in a guy that's incredibly entertaining but is a little bit on the older side and probably around the corner from retirement?
So I am really, I think it would have been really bad had Romero won that decision for UFC, because then Whittaker would be champion and nobody would believe he's the real champion. He'd be in the Cormier position, which is a killer position. I mean, Cormier had become a big draw as champion. You would go, well, the belt helped him. But what's happened is if people believe somebody else is the rightful champion, you as champion, it's a real bad position to be in. So, I mean, Romero's lost to him twice. He missed weight. I mean, in a sense, like, look, it was a really close fight, and I could see if he had made weight, and they did this fight, and even though it was the second one, and it's very debatable who won, where you would go, hey, look, it was a coin toss who won, and it was. I did have it 48-47 for Whittaker, but it was. Look, it all came down to round 4, to me, and that was a close round. But so I think that. You got 2, and he's missed weight twice also, not just one. So I think you just can't go. I mean, to me, Romero needs 2 wins and making weight both times before I would consider him as a contender. If he does that, I think I would, because he didn't get beat significantly in the fight. But now, to me, he's got to go to Gastelum or Weidman. I mean, those are the only 2 choices. Probably Weidman. When Weidman's the bigger name of the 2. And Weidman is a name, even though he's been beaten a couple of times, I think that a win over Weidman will mean the most for Whittaker if he can get it, because I don't think, even though he's upcoming and everything, I don't think people will be that going crazy if Whittaker beats Gastelum. It's a good win, but it's not a great win, whereas I think, again, like, Weidman's been around longer, and he's kind of considered, he's really a much bigger star.
And what do you think of people sort of talking about Romero going up to light heavyweight? Because we know that division is pretty quiet at the moment. Gustafsson is sort of looking for a fight. Rockhold is out with his leg thing, and Cormier is pretty tied up with Stipe, and who knows what's going to happen there. Do you think, from his perspective, if he's looking to have last couple of fights, do you think it might be wise to move up?
Okay. If it's to me, it's all in his mind and his ability to make the weight. If he thinks that he messed up in some way, and that's why he didn't make the weight the last 2 times, and he can do it the next time, he should probably stay at middleweight. But if he's tortured himself and couldn't make it twice in a row, yeah, then he should move up.
It would be fascinating to see how that would play out. I want to ask you, Dave, about the great article that you wrote on MMA Fighting the other day about how you spoke about how UFC are financially secure until 2023 with the ESPN deal, but there are brand risks. For those people who haven't read the fascinating article, can you sort of talk to us a little bit about what these risks are? Because you pointed out some really interesting facts, how they've taken a lot more money, but at the same time, reduce the amount of, I suppose, TV exposure they're going to have, a lot more digital shows.
Right, yeah. So, financially it's a great deal, but we're going from, we're in the United States, you have a TV show almost every weekend, and now it's going to be a lot less, which, and also shorter. I mean, we're pretty much used to 5-hour TV shows every Saturday night. I mean, it's not every single Saturday, but it's most Saturdays on TV here, on FS1 or sometimes on Fox. So now we're going to be going to, it's a rarity, we're going to have pay-per-view prelims 12 times a year, and then we're going to have 10 TV shows, but only 3 hours instead of 5. And then everything else is going to be on a streaming service, which is well and good. It's not an expensive streaming service. If you're a UFC regular fan, it's easy and all that. But to make new fans, no, because new fans, the people who are kind of like tuning in and just, don't want to spend extra money for a streaming service, or don't even know there's a fight on and just kind of flip around, hey, there's a fight on, which is a lot of people. Those people are not going to be flipping around and seeing it. They're not going to know what's on. So there is that negative. And then with several years of this, do you become more of a niche sport because less people see you than before? That's the thing. Is it harder to make new stars? But on the flip side, it's ESPN you're under contract with, and ESPN is kind of like the tastemaker. So if ESPN gives you more and more coverage and pushes your guys, and your guys are on ESPN more, there is that benefit too. I mean, if ESPN brings guys in and they go everywhere, and the average sports fan starts seeing, say, whoever it's going to be, Stipe Miocic or whatever, somebody who's like a guy who's a really good fighter but not really a big star, if they start seeing him all over the place, maybe his pay-per-views will start doing bigger, and he'll be accepted as more of a sports star. So it's kind of like there's two sides to this coin. But it's interesting because no other major sport has reduced their TV to this degree and gone streaming in the United States. So it's very much uncharted waters.
And I think one of the interesting things is one of your colleagues, obviously a fantastic journalist and is sort of a pioneer in the industry, Ariel Helwani's sort of gone over to ESPN as well. And for a lot of people, this has been pretty big news. I mean, fans. You could argue that for the longest amount of time outside of fighters, he's probably been one of the bigger personalities in the sport because he's been in there for so long. What do you think him going over to ESPN, so doing this show with Chael, moving the MMA hour over to ESPN, what do you think that kind of says about how ESPN's going to be kind of treating this deal with the UFC? And also with Dana White saying, look, he doesn't really have anything to do with us, but, Ariel being a reporter there and sort of interviewing the fighters and having to sort of, I suppose, work with the UFC a little bit closer. Do you see any complications? Do you see how that could possibly create any problems?
Yeah, because I've been through it with Ariel and with MMA fighting, where things that have caused problems, so I know it can always happen. I think that both sides don't want it to happen. I think it's a positive for ESPN that they would hire him, because I think that if UFC was controlling all the hires, UFC would he wouldn't be high on that list. So I think it's a feather in the cap. For ESPN, if they wanted to get coverage, he's the guy to go to. I mean, so I think it's a real positive that ESPN did it. I mean, how this is all going to go down, I think, I don't anticipate something bad happening, but I do know that, UFC, the last thing that happened I thought was really minor, and it turned into something giant, and I didn't foresee it coming. And so could that happen again? I mean, yeah, it's possible, but I think that he's a big enough name, and also the way it backfired so big publicly, I don't see them trying to do a thing where they ban him or anything, or try to get him, but then again, they did try to get him fired from Fox, and it did succeed. So there's that aspect too. This is a really, it's a potentially volatile story. You can't deny that.
I was going to say, do you know why Dana White and the UFC would have sort of allowed this? Because we saw with the Mayweather-McGregor fight, Ariel Helwani was supposed to be part of the Showtime broadcast, which would have been excellent, and then Dana White put the kibosh on that. Why do you think he didn't put the kibosh on this? Is this a case of ESPN sort of being too big, too powerful, where they can sort of do whatever they want? And if it did come to another situation like with the Fox, deal where Ariel was released from Fox, where ESPN could just say, no, we like him, we're keeping him.
Look, just the fact that they hired him tells me that I don't think they hired him to get rid of him on the first phone call, because the reality is they had to know his history. His history is not quiet. And the history is that, UFC tried to get rid of him from multiple things and succeeded. Yet they hired him because in their minds, I think they wanted the best guy or the most popular guy. And the fact is, they know the history, and I think that what it says is that they're going to do what they're going to do, and what UFC likes doesn't count for their non-UFC. Their broadcasters are not going to be guys that UFC just says, "Hey, I don't want him here anymore." I think and to me, that's a great sign for ESPN, because it shows they're going to take it very seriously, because you can always get a shill. You know what I mean? You can always get a shill and a face who halfway knows the sport. To take Ariel Helwani, you're going in there saying that we're taking him with the fact that we know UFC's not going to be happy because we want the best coverage possible, and we're not looking for fluff. So, when I saw it, I thought, bravo for ESPN.
I thought that too. And I also thought, how smart of ESPN capitalizing on the fact that, Ariel's kind of like one of the biggest stars when it comes to the media, and the MMA Hour is such a big show, taking that over to ESPN. I mean, some big companies like ESPN wouldn't have seen the great opportunity there. So congratulations to all of them.
That's certainly, that's a real big one.
I feel like it's kind of gone under the radar a bit, Dave. Like the MMA Hour for a long time has been a massive program, and you could say it's been an independent program, off TV, off a whole bunch of different things, but for it to become as big as it did, and ESPN being the first ones to try and sign that, I suppose, and bring that massive program over to their own platform, I just found that really clever on ESPN's part.
Well, and also the other good thing is and I presume this will stay the same, I'm almost sure, is that, he's not, ESPN, because of the Ariel Helwani MMA Hour, they're going to be covering all MMA, whether it's Bellator, whether it's small shows, whether, some pro wrestling, probably with Ariel and Chael, if it fits in, probably not a lot, but probably some. So I think that, it's not going to be just, time will tell what's going to happen. But my feeling is that it's not going to be a UFC show, but it's going to be an MMA show, which means that ESPN is going to be covering MMA and not just 100% UFC. And again, for the sport of MMA, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But then you go back to the UFC, and they've got the deal with ESPN, and they want Bellator and other companies being covered. That's going to be interesting. But anyway, we want to quickly talk about Conor McGregor with you, Dave, before we go. Obviously, we know you had the court hearing. We have to kind of wait till the 26th of July now to really find out how it all goes down. But do you anticipate him sort of being back and being a part of the 2018 calendar? It's looking like he may possibly be back at UFC 229, but it's all just speculation at this point.
Yeah, that's the rumors that I'm hearing too. Until we hear it, it's been so long since Conor's fought in UFC, and he made so much money with the Mayweather fight that until this thing is signed and announced, I don't take anything seriously. So who knows? UFC needs him more than he needs UFC. He's got a lot of money, and fighting's not an easy job.
Yeah. For you, what do you think the fight is to make, Khabib or GSP? Because we saw Faraz Zahabi recently, or I think it was early today, saying how he would like GSP to fight Floyd Mayweather.
GSP and Floyd in an MMA fight?
In a boxing match.
Better not be a boxing match. I think I'm all burned out on the boxing aspect. But as far as there's two opponents. There's George and there's Khabib. I think Khabib is better in the sense that it's a grudge match. It's the ability to create a new star. The George fight, can also happen at some point. But I think that I really do think that we need like a serious champion versus number one contender title fight more than we need to see, George and Conor. And George and Conor would do bigger business of the two. Maybe not a lot bigger, though, because I think that there's a grudge match aspect that the George fight doesn't have. The Khabib fight's going to have big. So, but I think the Khabib fight's the one to make first. And then the winner of that fight against George, I think that's a great idea.
Which I guess, in a sense,
or even if it's the loser, and if Conor loses, even if Conor loses the match, but he looks respectable or even not respectable. Conor against George is a super fight on a big show. That's still it's going to be massive. That'll be like one of the bigger fights in history. No matter what happens in the Conor Khabib fight. I
found it fascinating when the UFC was trying to allegedly set up this tournament. With McGregor and Khabib, and then Diaz and GSP. Obviously, it fell apart because Diaz and GSP didn't want to. But if GSP beat Diaz, which was a high possibility, if Khabib ended up beating Conor, he'd be a bigger star. So him and GSP would have been a big fight. If Conor won, then obviously you have Conor and GSP. That would have been interesting. And even if Conor lost, you still could have done Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor. So it would have been really interesting the way that would have played out as well.
Yeah, all those fights are big. That's the one thing. If they can just get the guys to do the fights, it's like when people look at like UFC's numbers right now, which aren't necessarily spectacular.
Yeah.
The fact is that we can sit here and make 3-4 fights out of just those guys that will all do giant business. So it is there. It's just a matter of making the fight. It's not like MMA is not popular or it's gone down. It's that we haven't gotten that fight that people want. But there are lots of those fights. I mean, not lots, but there's 4 or 5 of those fights out there. And when they're done, natural law, like more fights will stem from that, and there'll be more fights to make.
Just while we're sort of on the topic of GSP, when you look at sort of the rumors of Brock Lesnar potentially coming in and facing the winner of Stipe and Cormier, which is happening in a couple of weeks, it almost feels like it's another it's almost like the GSP situation all over again in the heavyweight division, where you've got a few contenders, guys like Blades, maybe Cain Velasquez, Volkov, they're waiting in the wings, and then in comes Brock Lesnar, who hasn't legitimately won a fight in years. I think Shane Carwin was the last one that he actually won.
Shane Carwin, 2010. That's a long time ago.
Yeah. Do you see it kind of like the GSP situation, but in the heavyweight division now?
No, I see. I mean, from a sports standpoint, I see it as worse because GSP was. I mean, Brock was a good fighter and he was a former champion. GSP is an all-time great. I mean, the idea of GSP sitting out for a couple of years and walking in and getting a championship fight, that really didn't bother me because he is an all-time legend great. Brock Lesnar's a giant name, but he's not an all-time great in my mind. I mean, he's a really big, strong wrestler who had some wins, but it's not like he, was, the greatest fighter in UFC history, where you can argue that GSP is, and at worst he's second or third, right? So I see him as completely different. But as far as there's not a big list of great heavyweight contenders. I mean, you got Blades, maybe Cain, but Cain hasn't fought in a long time either.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bother me too much that Brock will get the shot. But, yeah, from a sports standpoint, it's tough. And then what happens – I mean, I don't think – the difference with GSP and Bisping is there was always a really good chance that GSP would win like he did. Whereas Stipe and Brock Lesnar, I mean, anything can happen in a fight, of course. Or even Cormier and Brock Lesnar. But it's hard for me to envision Brock beating either of those two guys.
Yeah, because I was going to say, the risk there of Brock Lesnar being a really, really unpredictable guy, going in there, potentially winning the belt with his history, you'd, of course, want to avoid another USADA problematic situation with Lesnar. And then even if he just, his pattern for the last few years has been, coming in one fight and disappearing. So what if he did that again and then just went back to the WWE, as champion? That'd be pretty bad for the UFC.
Absolutely. Well, I think that the whole thing there is but what does contract mean if you sign a guy and say, if you win, you're going to fight again? They did that with George. I mean, that was the whole big thing before the George fight. It's like, no matter what, if he wins, he's going to fight Robert Whittaker. And he won, and he didn't fight Robert Whittaker. So we've already proven that you can put that in the contract, and that doesn't mean anything. So, yes, that aspect, winning, going in there, if he actually does win the title and then decides I want to retire again and go back to WWE, that doesn't do UFC any good at all.
And the other thing is, like, we know with USADA, they can hide and not really reveal who's in the testing pool if an athlete doesn't want to announce their retirement. So for all we know, Lesnar may or may not be in the USADA pool, and if he is, we don't know.
He's not, because I think people have asked. I mean, I don't know, like in the last week or so, but
yeah.
I know people have asked as recently as a couple of weeks ago, and he wasn't. Because, I mean, the whole big thing is June 30th, which is coming up soon. If he's not in the pool by June 30th, he's not fighting by December 30th.
Yeah, but the thing is, people have pointed out that with USADA, they can just hide it. They can, because if Lesnar doesn't want to reveal that he's out of retirement, then they're not going to reveal that he's in the testing pool. Otherwise, obviously, everybody would know that he's back. So, I don't know. It's a crazy situation. Yeah.
I was gonna say, Dave, and we'll let you go in just a moment. We're sorry for taking up so much of your time. With a guy like Lesnar, I've always been of the opinion that this isn't a guy that really needs to fight a Stipe or DC or have a belt on the line. This is a guy that you could just set up a fun fight with anyone sort of in the heavyweight division and still draw. Do you think it's necessary to sort of put him up against a Stipe or DC? Or do you think it draws more of a crowd if you fight someone where he's got a likelier chance of possibly winning?
Depends on who the person's got to be the right personality. I don't think it has to be a championship fight either. I mean, to me, the fight that would be real big, but you can't do it for political reasons, is Fedor. I still think the idea of Brock Lesnar and Fedor it's not as big as it would have been like 6 years ago. But I think that there's some, weird intrigue because there were people who always wanted to see that fight. So it's kind of like I think that might mean something. But in the UFC's heavyweight division, I mean, if it's not a championship fight, I mean, who would have a great story with Brock? I mean, I think Overeem and I think Kane, because they both beat him. I think you could sell both those fights. But I don't know if, I don't know that Brock would want to fight Kane, and then Kane's always hurt, which is another negative.
Yeah.
Like I don't see, a healthy Cain Velasquez and Brock. We've seen that fight. Overeem, Overeem was a very different Overeem than he is now. So I mean, I could see that fight being made, and Brock actually maybe even wanting that fight, to get back. So yeah, it's a possibility. But of course, Overeem's coming off of a loss, and he's not the top guy right now. So, but I think that you could do that. Yeah.
I always feel like a Francis Ngannou or something, he'd even agree to, because he's a crazy man, the Brock Lesnar. Yeah.
The thing with Francis Ngannou and Brock Lesnar right now is I think that's a big sellable fight because everyone knows that Francis Ngannou's got the big punch, and everyone knows that Francis Ngannou can get taken down and out-wrestled, and Brock Lesnar's a great wrestler. So there is that intrigue because we've seen the weakness of Francis Ngannou, and Brock Lesnar does have the tools to exploit that weakness. So that is very much an interesting fight.
Yeah, I almost see it like the Shane Carwin fight all over again, except Shane probably had a little bit better wrestling as well. As we wrap up, Dave, obviously we're Melbourne-based, and we have the big news from the WWE about this huge show at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. For people who don't realize, the MCG, it's a super big venue. It holds 100,000 people. So we remember the WWE came down in 2002 and did the Global Warning pay-per-view. That was 56,000. Etihad Stadium, where Ronda Rousey fought for UFC 193. What did you make of the WWE sort of taking this big risk and coming down to Melbourne and putting on a show in such a big venue? And the ticket prices have been released. They're quite expensive. If you want to sit front row, it's about 2,000 Australian dollars. I think they could be as cheap as about $65, $70 if you want to sit all the way up the top. But when you sit all the way up the top, it's literally like looking down on ants, because we've been in that arena multiple times and watched many, many football games. It is literally the nosebleed section up there. So we imagine, and there's apparently there's 9 different tiers of ticket price, but they've announced a big lineup. It doesn't have Brock Lesnar on it. It's got The Undertaker. It's got Triple H. It's got pretty much anyone they could bring. I think Ronda Rousey is one of their biggest draws as well. But do you think they could get it done and fill up an arena of that size with that kind of ticket price as well?
You know the market better than me. I think that they'll do pretty well. But yeah, the ticket prices surprised me because when they did the show in Saudi Arabia, the tickets were like $5 and $3. $5 and $3, and these are a million times more expensive.
Well,
than this.
Are these more expensive than the WrestleMania tickets? Some people have said that apparently WrestleMania is cheaper than this show.
No, WrestleMania is about $2,000 US,
okay, so it's a little bit cheap.
So it's a little bit cheaper, but those are pretty close. They're pretty close to WrestleMania prices, and it's more tickets than a WrestleMania because, maybe, yeah. I mean, I heard they're setting up for 70, and the Cowboy Stadium WrestleMania did probably 80 to 90 legit. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different numbers. It did not do 100. But most WrestleManias are doing 60, 60 to 70. So, but WrestleMania people come. It's not like WrestleMania draws from one place. WrestleMania draws from all over. And I mean, the idea. This is not WWE's idea to do this big stadium. I think if it was WWE, they probably would just run, Rod Laver Arena.
Yeah.
Is that the one in Melbourne? Or is that in
Yeah, Rod Laver Arena, which is where the Australian Open goes. It's a great venue over there. It's about 15,000, 16,000. And they, by the way, we've been in there where it's been quite empty sometimes when they come down.
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole thing is the tourist board wanted something really big at that stadium. So they're the ones who suggested. I think WWE, if they had their choice and they were into a stadium, they'd go, the other stadium because it's easier to fill, a lot easier to fill. So, and they've already run it. But, it's the question is how does, how many people will travel to Melbourne? And it's not going to be the numbers to travel to WrestleMania, but how many people will travel to Melbourne, and how many wrestling fans are there in Australia? And you guys might know that better than I do.
I know that Bon Jovi's doing a show there soon, so apparently he might do quite well. I know the only other times it gets sold out is for the cricket, a couple of times a year, and for the grand final in the Australian Football League. And apart from that, they struggle filling it up. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes, especially with the fact that it's an open roof stadium in Melbourne. Weather's pretty crazy. So we'll see what happens. And the thing with Etihad Stadium, which is now becoming Marvel Stadium because Marvel have bought out the rights to it, that has a roof on it. So very interesting. But Dave, thanks so much for jumping on. Guys, make sure to check out Dave's amazing work. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Dave Meltzer, WON. I love it when you respond to all the fans on Twitter, Dave. It's always awesome answers. You go straight to the point with them. So make sure to jump on there and ask Dave any questions that you have. And of course, subscribe to the Wrestling Observer newsletter. It's the OG. It's one of the greatest newsletters out there. Make sure to subscribe. It's amazing work and insight into the world of pro wrestling and MMA. All your news. Of course, Dave, we are honored to have you on the program. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there he is, guys. Dave Meltzer back on the program. Always a pleasure. I feel like we could chat to him all day long. Every time we have him on, there's like a list of topics to cover with Dave Meltzer. And we usually get through about half of them because we talk so long. But I'm curious, man. There's a lot of things to see how they shake out. I want to see how this Conor Khabib situation plays out, where the negotiations. I'm almost more curious what happens with Brock Lesnar, whether we'll actually see him back in the UFC by the end of the year. Easy in the USANA drug testing pool. I don't know, man. A lot of fascinating stuff.
Yeah, lots of stuff happening. And Dave's, it's interesting because every time we speak to Dave, it just takes me back because when we were growing up, we used to always sort of listen to him break a whole bunch of stuff down, and it's fun to actually have him on the program. And a few times we've met Dave in person when we've covered events, and he's always been a really, really great guy. So always in shape.
Ooh,
looks like he's always ready to go. The UFC should call him up if someone falls out of the main event.
100%.
Yeah, always ready to speak.
Money weight Dave, that's what they should call him. He doesn't care. He'll take any fight. Well, I was gonna say, and we had him on the original Submission Radio. We were actually on radio. What was it? I think 2006, 2007. So just thinking about this for the first time crazy, now, our relationship with Dave has been what, 12 years? That's insane. Holy shit,
crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's really good. He's a really good dude, and always takes the time out to come on. So, and he is a super busy guy.
So busy.
Awesome to have him on. As we wrap up, Cass, Ocean's 8. I saw Ocean's 8 a few days ago.
I'm very curious what you think because I love Ocean's 11, 12, 13, 11 being the best. And I don't like what they're doing where, there's this whole feminist movement and they put it all women's one together. I don't like this. I think it's unnecessary. So I've been avoiding it like the plague. I'm wondering if you can sway me and say, actually, it was a great movie. You should go see it.
Can't sway you. I will say this. Like, to me, it was a little bit different. I liked Ocean's 11.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a big fan of Ocean's 12. Mm-hmm. To me, like, the story was all over the place. And I enjoyed Ocean's 13, but I didn't think it was very good, if that makes sense, in the sense that I liked it because you had all the fun cast. Al Pacino was in it, and you kind of got a cool payoff at the end. But to me, Ocean's 11 was the real biscuit out of 100%. 3. And I guess comparing it to Ocean's 11... See, this is the thing. And, I mean... People will listen to this and they'll say, he doesn't like it because it's an old chick's movie, but that's not it at all. The reason why is because when you do compare it to all those movies, you compare it to the great you can't help but compare it to the great actors that were in those movies. When you look at guys like Matt Damon, George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Garcia, the list goes on, Al Pacino, all those kinds of guys. They really collected, like, the casting for those movies was unbelievable. They had a collection of legendary actors. They kind of had, they had Casey Affleck, the guy that won, the Oscar recently for Best Actor. They had a real collection of talent there. And I think the casting for Ocean's 8 was a little bit off. Like, I like Sandra Bullock. I think she's cool.
Yeah.
But to me, she was one of the reasons why this movie didn't really work for me. She kind of dropped the ball. She was very cold. She was not very emotive. She just didn't have that mystique about her like a Danny Ocean had, like a lot of those guys had, where you kind of knew there was something going on in the background, and they were being clever and more clever than what they showed, and there was more to what it seems. You didn't have that mystique with her. So she kind of let me down in the movie. I thought the writing wasn't very good. They cast a bunch of talented comedians in there. I forgot the names, but basically they didn't give them a chance to shine. You didn't have those Ocean 11, even Ocean 12 and 13 moments where it's like, whoa, this is what really happened, or they're being sarcastic and talking about something else while referring to something else. You didn't have that, and you didn't feel the chemistry like you did in those other movies, and I think the chemistry's kind of really important. So even when you watch the Seinfeld episode, The Switch, between George and Jerry, whatever it is, there needs to be sort of, in these kinds of movies, if you're gonna take on a big, massive movie like Oceans, you got to sort of do it. I found the story to be a little bit weak. I like the fact it was set in New York, and I still enjoy the fact that it was a heist movie. For me, actually, Rihanna did a really good job. I thought she's had a lot of criticism in the past. I think she was in some Battleship movie, and she was absolutely horrible. Here, she was really, really good. The plot was, Anne Hathaway did all right. The plot was, you could pick holes in it. With Ocean's 11 specifically, when they did their heist and they got it done, you kind of look back on it and you thought this was clever. With this one, you look back on it and you kind of go, well, it's kind of like you could pick it apart. You could say, well, why didn't they just look here? Or why didn't they just look at this footage? Or what, why aren't they in prison? So I didn't think it was thought out as well. But I enjoy heist movies. So I think they would have done better if they got a collection of women and they did a heist movie, not an Oceans one, but wrote up their own one, really worked on the storyline and made it kind of special in their own. Yeah, so it was a bit stupid. There's some other stuff that happens in it. Like, it's not a spoiler. You basically don't know. At the start of the movie, at the end of the, well, actually, I don't want to spoil it. But basically, it's not clever what happens in the movie. So no real surprises there. I'll give it 2 Timothy Johnson mustaches out of 5, just because I like a good heist. Well, I was looking at heist movies, and it's like, you look at them, you go through the list, and there hasn't been that many. I love Italian Job.
Yeah.
With Mark Wahlberg. I think that's a good movie. I like Ocean's 11. I don't mind the other Ocean's movies. There's been some other ones with Jason Statham, like Bank Job. I actually didn't really love Bank Job very much. There's some old school ones that I didn't really get a chance to watch just yet. There's ones like Tower Heist, Ben Stiller and Eddie Murphy, which were okay, but not great. So to me, anytime a heist movie that comes out that is sort of decent, I'll watch it. So it gets the 2 out of 5 stars. 2 out of 5 Timothy Johnson mustaches. I don't think anyone needs to rush to the movies to see this, but if it's up there and it's on the TV, maybe check it out. Also interested to see what happens next, because you get this kind of feeling that maybe in the next one they'll kind of try and bring everyone together. I don't know. Also, one of the other problems is Kate Blanchett's in it, but it's kind of like she's doing a parody of Brad Pitt, which I don't like. If you're doing a movie, kind of do your own characters. Don't try to kind of have female parodies of the male characters. Ends up being weird, right? Like you're comparing them the whole time rather than trying to sort of focus on that storyline. So.
Well, I think that right there, obviously I haven't seen it, but I think that's the problem right there, that everybody's going to compare it to the other Oceans movies. I think you hit the nail on the head that, like, as soon as everybody saw, all right, you got Oceans movies, right? You had 3 previously. They were essentially like an all-male cast. Of course, you had Julia Roberts and Catherine Zeta-Jones. Now, there's all-women cast. Oh, okay, we see what you're doing here. So you're right. They should have just done a completely fresh movie, not called it Oceans anything, and just been a chick heist movie, and I would have been all for it. Because like you mentioned, there are some pretty good actresses in there. Anne Hathaway, Kate Blanchett, Sandra Bullock, Helena Bonham Carter. Although I heard that her accent is being slammed in the movie. People don't like it.
Yeah. I don't know. And it's interesting because, again, it goes down to the casting, and they cast Ocean's 11 so well. Can you imagine if Brad Pitt wasn't in that movie. If George Clooney and Brad Pitt
cast.
weren't in that movie together,
Yeah.
what if it was just George Clooney and some other guy?
Yeah.
Or if Brad Pitt and some other guy, and then you had like guys like Matt Damon and all these other dudes. Just every scene was like a kicking goal scene. They had soul. All these legendary actors in the movie, and you even mentioned it, like Julia Roberts. Like she did a great job, right? So yeah, it's tough. It just doesn't fire on all cylinders. And it's like Ghostbusters, right? I enjoyed Ghostbusters more than I thought I would. But because they just kind of recreated it, it just kind of fell flat because I think people get annoyed when they have to compare something to like its old counterpart. I think people enjoy, and that's why a lot of old movies like Oceans, that was done with obviously Frank Sinatra and those guys back in the day, but that's not a movie that you and me would have watched. You know what I mean? So we're not comparing George Clooney to Frank Sinatra. It's not, or The Magnificent Seven with Denzel Washington, which I didn't think was the greatest movie, but that's based on the old school Magnificent Seven, which came out ages ago. But because Ocean's 11 came out in 2001, but it still kind of feels like it came out yesterday because it's so well done. You know what I mean? It's like you can't help but compare. Or a movie like Ghostbusters, you can't help but compare because these are classics. So, I don't know. I'd like to see more movies left alone, no more reboots.
I think
getting kind of ridiculous.
Well, they're rebooting Kick-Ass, so you better strap yourself in
really?
for that one.
That's such a weird one to
But it's weird because it doesn't feel like it's that old at all. Like Kick-Ass feels fresh. I think when did it come out? Like 2010, something like that. So what are we? 8 years in? Yeah, I don't know, but it might be by the same director.
Because that second one, I feel like the second one wasn't as good. Yeah, they really dropped the ball. And it's like Sin City. Remember the first Sin City was great. Then the second Sin City came out. It wasn't that good. It was like, what happened?
I didn't mind the second one. I quite enjoyed the second Sin City, but obviously the cast wasn't quite there. It wasn't as an iconic cast. I still really enjoyed the shit out of that one. But yeah, I'll tell you what, I love in Ocean's 11, like the chemistry and the dynamic between Brad Pitt and George Clooney. All the characters, but mainly Brad Pitt and George Clooney. Like, that makes the movie, that makes all the movies. I love in the first one where they're like talking about some guy and it's like, they're trying to recruit everyone. And he's all like, oh, he won't do it. And he's like, yeah, he won't do it. And then he's like, you could ask him. Hey, I could ask him. Like, it's just all these like little bits, like that chemistry. This is why. What was that movie?
That reminds me of when we put an episode of Submission Radio together.
It's always like that. It literally happened like a week ago. I was like, hey, do you think we can get blah blah on the show? You're like, nah, I don't think so. And I'm like, well, you could ask him. You're like, I could ask him. Actually, that's true. That's true. And like, because they're recruiting people, we're trying to recruit people. It's exactly like that. Yeah.
But they got a weird thing as well. Like it's kind of like they speak without speaking, right? Like they communicate with their eyes and just the script. If you just read the script, it's like doesn't make any sense, but those guys do. So it's like a once in a million thing. And then Sandra Bullock just didn't pull that off with Cate Blanchett. And Cate Blanchett kind of did the whole Brad Pitt thing, and she was kind of, I think she was doing the eating thing where she was like eating
eating in every scene.
It wasn't cool. It wasn't cool, and you kind of.
It's like, well, if you're gonna do that, why don't you just get fucking Brad Pitt and George Clooney? If you're gonna have these mirror images, if you're gonna have them do like all the same things, why do you need? That's just stupid. That's
but if you do eventually watch the movie, you'll see a bunch of stuff where you're like, well, that doesn't quite make sense and stuff. So and they also had what's his name, Don Cheadle.
Don Cheadle.
Don Cheadle, yeah.
So he was great as well. Okay.
No, well, he was great in Ocean's 11. It's kind of like Rihanna was him in this movie, right? And she did a good job, but it's like you don't need to get kind of like another kind of like African American person that's a woman to play the same role. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So it's
they just even if they wanted to use the same cast as in Ocean's 8, they should have just done their own. They shouldn't have been like, all right, you're the George Clooney, you're the Brad Pitt, you're this. Just do their own thing, fresh characters, and I think it would have been better.
They have a couple of surprise appearances, but they're a little bit disappointing. But anyway, guys, it's out there. Check it out if you can. It's done well at the box office, so who knows? Sandra Bullock, I don't know. I'd like Sandra Bullock. Do you like Sandra Bullock?
I do. I liked her in what was it, The Heat, that comedy with Melissa McCarthy, whatever. That was good.
Side. She's done some good some good action movies and back in the day, like things like Speed. Like they're not like Oscar nominated worthy movies, but they're like fun. Like she's done comedy stuff like Miss Congeniality. Like that's not an Oscar winning movie, but people like enjoy because she's funny in it. She's done a lot of comedy stuff. So I don't know. I don't know what happened to her here. She just kind of seemed really flat. Yeah. So
yeah, I'm trying to. Didn't she do some crime movies as well? I'm pulling up her IMDb.
She did this one where I think like
she did a bunch where
you got hacked or something, right? It was like an old school computer one or something.
Oh, you know it was bad, Gravity with George Clooney.
See,
Fuck,
everybody
that
loves
was
that
a bad movie.
and I hate that movie.
Oh man,
how bad is that? There's a dream sequence in that movie where you think everything's okay, and you just realize it's like, oh, we're still here. Yeah, it was horrible. And that's an example, right, of like, because George Clooney was in Ocean's 11. Ocean's 11 was great, but you put him up here and it just didn't quite work. It was just a stupid story. People really like the effects in that, but I'm like, to me, it's not. When I watch a movie, it's more about the story, and the effects come kind of like second. Because when you look back on all those classic movies from the 80s, and they look a little bit cheesy now, the story is the thing that kind of still makes it cool.
Yeah.
When you look back on those movies that are like, oh, this had. I remember a movie came out with I think it was like Tom Hanks and Johnny Depp. It was called like Public Enemies or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, oh my God, there's this scene at the end where he like kind of shoots him in the head and you kind of become the bullet. And that was like the big like that's happened so many time and time again. But then like when you watch that back, now the effect kind of looks shit and the story's shit. So there's nothing, there's no reason to check it out. So yeah.
Also, Sandra Bullock was in some funny titled movies. The Prince of Egypt. Did you see that one?
No.
Well, that's not a funny title, but Making Sandwiches. She was in that.
Wow.
Speed 2, Cruise Control.
I like that. That's the one with the leeches and William Dafoe, right?
I think so. It's been a while since I've watched it.
The cruise ship like goes on the.
Yeah. She was also Forces of Nature. What else? Murder by Numbers. I think that was a big one as well. She's done a bunch of those murder ones. Yeah.
She did that one about where she was like in rehab or something, right? It was like some kind of. She was a drunk.
Oh yeah, she did that one with the big black guy, the NFL player or whatever. I don't think he was an NFL player in real life. I think that I saw parts of that.
Blindside, right?
Oh, I think that's the one. Yeah. That looked really good.
Yeah, she won an Oscar for that. That was a really good movie. It's just interesting because she's a really good actress, but it's just maybe she just wasn't in the right frame of mind.
The Lake House. I think that's when she was doing all those like love, romantic ones with I think Keanu Reeves. Yeah, right? I'm glad he's going back to doing action movies, even though John Wick 2 was shit. There's this new one coming out. Did you see that?
No.
There's this new one. Our friend put out the trailer. There's a new one coming out with Keanu Reeves, and it's like very John Wick looking, but it's not John Wick.
Oh.
I'll tell you the title in 2 seconds.
Did you see that movie Knock Knock?
I didn't.
About the chicks that force him into a threesome and then torture him in the house.
Sounds like our past weekend.
If you guys haven't seen the trailer, make sure you do. It's ridiculous. We might put it on our Facebook page just so you guys can check it out.
You guys need to look forward to Siberia, where Keanu Reeves plays Lucas Hill. I saw the trailer the other day. It looks very John Wick-ish. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll probably be
giving it like dude.
I didn't see an accent, so I don't think so.
It's like Jennifer Lawrence. Did you watch that movie Red Sparrow?
No, I didn't. Was it good?
It just annoyed me because she was putting on a fake Russian accent the whole time, right? It's like...
was it a decent Russian accent? Or was
it wasn't very good. The movie was stupid. And everyone was putting on these fake accents. It's like, get people with a real accent. Anyway. Now we're just bashing movies for no reason.
Well,
we should remind people to like...
Box Office Royale with cheese.
Yeah.
That's good.
There's some controversial things happening right now. I think Yoda's battling it out with... Who's he fighting? James Bond's in there against Darth Vader.
See, okay, so it is... Who is the most iconic character of all time, right? And obviously,
Terminator versus Yoda, is it? I think so.
I voted Terminator. I think Terminator's a pretty safe bet. I think Terminator's more iconic than Yoda. Because it's like Yoda's a big character... in an iconic franchise, but it's not like he's the main character, right? Terminator is Terminator. I think more like what are the most iconic Yoda lines, right? People know how to speak like Yoda, but what are his iconic lines? Whereas with Terminator, I'll be back, and there's all these other ones. And I'll say James Bond versus Darth Vader. That's an easy one for me. Like you can say Darth Vader's a huge character. He's a big character in a big franchise, but he's like James Bond. Like how many actors have played James Bond? He's literally one of the most iconic characters in all of cinema. Like everybody, Bond, James Bond. I think that's one of the most iconic lines ever. I think it's easily. What do you think? Who did you vote for, Dennis? Don't break my heart here.
Tough one.
Did you vote yet?
I have been voting, but I have to be honest. I've been a bit dodgy. I haven't been following the guidelines and just been voting for things that I've liked.
Mm-hmm.
There's some controversial stuff. If you guys go on the page, me trying to vote for Axel Foley over James Bond.
What are you doing? You're gonna break the page. Well, I've got the phone out right here. I don't know if the camera will focus, but I am going for. Wait, let me just see if everything. All right. If you're watching on YouTube, then you'll be able to see this. Here we go. Make sure there's no lighting. No, I don't want to. I voted for Yoda by accident. All right, I'll undo that.
I think I voted for Yoda too, actually. I don't know why. I wanted to watch the world burn.
I'm undoing it. I'm voting for Terminator. Bang.
Right.
There we go.
What's the percentage?
60% Terminator, 40% Yoda. Another win for the good guys.
Swing.
Yeah. 45 votes so far. 45,000 votes.
Well, that's the reason why we're mentioning it. So if you guys have an opinion on it, jump on and give it a vote. I've actually been suggesting it to a bunch of people at work and all around the place. And there's been a few little, people have been like, well, I don't agree with this. There's only one thing you can do. It's kind of like, when a politician goes up for election, you have to vote.
That's
if you don't vote, then don't complain.
Yeah.
It could be Yoda versus Darth Vader in the final. Could be Yoda versus James Bond, or it could be Terminator versus James. Terminator versus James Bond. Who are you going to go there? James Bond?
Yeah.
So James Bond all the way.
I think James Bond should win the whole thing. I didn't really think about it too much before this, but fuck. James Bond is on 31%, Darth Vader's on 69%, and the poll ends in 8 hours. So it's not looking good.
What happened to Batman? I think Batman beat the Joker, didn't he?
He did. 69%, 31% the Joker.
And what happened
I think that's
to him
fair.
after that? Is he still in the running?
Yeah, Batman's in there. He's this was just the other day. So Batman's in there. I don't know, he'll probably be facing Darth Vader. I haven't looked at the bracket.
See, that'll be an interesting one. Batman versus Darth Vader.
Or maybe it'll be Batman and Terminator. It'll be one of them. Terminator beat Rocky. You would have been pretty upset there.
Yeah,
Who did you vote for? You voted Rocky, didn't you?
I think I went with Rocky. What was the percentage there? Was that a big landslide?
I think it was another 36 Rocky, 64 Terminator.
Okay, that's pretty good. Yeah. Rocky's pretty iconic too. And it's going to be interesting. It's a good page. You guys should jump on and like it, and you'll probably see us debating whatever the topic is going to be in the comment section below. I
Fiercely
recommend that if a poll doesn't go your way, jump on in the comment section and sort of share your piece. Don't just vote. I like when people comment. I like when people say this is ridiculous. Blah,
the more
blah.
outrage, the better. We want fire in your comments. We want to feel the pain or the happiness of victory when your guy wins.
There is no judgment as long as you don't vote against Batman. All right, guys, that's the end of the program. A big thanks to Tai Tuivasa, Dave Meltzer, Stipe, the baddest man on the planet, making a stop here at Submission Radio. A quick reminder to follow us on Twitter at Submission AUS, Facebook Submission Radio AU. Give us a like. Obviously Instagram as well. Give us a follow. That's at Submission Radio. And a big show coming at you guys next week. It's great to be back. Cass, any final words?
Nah, that's it. Have a great week, guys, and enjoy this weekend. Leon Edwards and Cowboy Cerrone. There's some fun fights on there.
And obviously we've got OSP versus Tyson Pedro. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Check that out. Give us your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're watching on YouTube, do you agree with our assessments of UFC 225? Anything that you've listened to on the show, or even Ocean's 8, drop it below. And we'd love to talk to you guys. We'd love to respond to you guys on YouTube, Twitter. Our DMs are open. Facebook, send us a message. Instagram, send us a message. And until then, guys, we'll catch you next week.